Chapter 637. 6th Grade of the Knight Academy. Of course, not all the 6th grade students were good at duels, but the 6th grade students who could move freely on the 7th floor of the castle were definitely not easy to deal with. It was obviously a foolish move to confront such an opponent head-on. But to retreat, of course, it was impossible. In Dake's resource map, there were only 4 resource points on the 7th floor. 2 of them had already been occupied, so there was only 1 left, and the last one had yet to be found. Considering the current situation on the 7th floor, the possibility of the last resource point being occupied was very high. This meant that if he chose to retreat at this time, it was very likely that he would miss the last opportunity. Then, through a transaction? Dake frowned slightly. This was obviously unrealistic. Since that was the case, he could only snatch it. Website: https://m. Vipkanchu. VIP. At this moment, he was less than 5 meters away from the washroom door, about a 60-degree angle with the washroom door. The senior from the Knight Academy was on the other side of the washroom, also about a 60-degree angle with the door. The distance between her and the washroom door was about 4.5 meters. Both sides were very close to each other. If it wasn't for the fact that they happened to encounter each other, they would have already entered the washroom. Dake's fingers moved slightly. Now that the cooldown of Pride 3 was over, if he activated it immediately, it would take 1 second to pull it out from the card pack. Usually, it would take 3 seconds to summon it, and it would also take time for the little fiendish beasts to evolve into fiendish beasts. Even if he could immediately use instant transmission to enter the washroom, it would take a lot of time. Perhaps it would be better to gather chi and run directly into the washroom. However, the advantage of using instant transmission was that it could effectively avoid the other party's interception methods. At the same time, if he could also use some methods to obstruct the other party, he would be able to seize the initiative. Wait. Dake suddenly noticed a problem. Where's her magic guide sprite? The moment he thought of this, Dake immediately became alert. However, the senior from the Knight Academy smiled sweetly. Sorry. In the next instant, a dazzling green light shone beneath Dake's feet. Countless vines appeared from the light, intertwining with each other and rising to the sky. In the blink of an eye, they weaved into a huge pillar-shaped cage. As for the senior, she quickly ran toward the bathroom door. A distance of 4.5 meters could be covered in a single breath. After running 2 steps, she turned her head to take a look leisurely. However, it was this one glance that caused her to miss the opportunity that was right in front of her. Through the gaps between the vines, she suddenly saw the white cat that had once shone brightly on the duel stage, and her eyes met with the cat's. The amber-like cat's eyes suddenly emitted a light similar to the crimson wheel, causing her brain to produce an intense dizziness at that moment, and her consciousness instantly fell into chaos. Ultimate skill: Cat's Eyes. By the time she woke up from her temporary confusion, Dake Dimming, who was trapped in the cage, had already disappeared. Oh no! Patricia Bullen shuddered violently, and the surging magic immediately dispersed the remaining chaos in her brain. However, when she turned to look into the bathroom, she found that the blonde young man dressed as a vampire was already standing at the door, smiling warmly at her. Senior, thank you for letting me win. Dake raised his hand and politely waved. Behind him, the demon beast pressed its hand on his shoulder. A woman's mouth. Patricia Bullen wasn't a sore loser. She took a deep breath and stretched out her hand. The huge cage of vines quickly disintegrated and shrunk into a small dark green snake. The small snake shrank and bounced into her palm. It raised its head and kept flicking its tongue at Dake. I will most likely stay in school this year. I hope to see you on the duel stage before I graduate. After leaving behind this sentence, which was roughly equivalent to, the green mountains will not change, and the green water will flow forever, Patricia Bullen was about to turn around and leave. However, Dake opened his mouth and asked, May I ask senior's name? Patricia replied, Patricia Bullen, 5th year, Magic Device Institute. After hearing this, Dake could not help but be surprised. Magic Device Institute? Isn't it the Knight Institute? And 5th year? Patricia raised her hand and pointed above her temple. She said coquettishly, "Of course I'm lying to you, idiot." Dake. After confirming that Patricia Bullen had indeed left, Dake relaxed a little. A girl's words could not be trusted. He had a deep understanding of this and had the dream demon and the milk-cant temporarily guard the door. Then, he took the Diru beast and the demon beast, and turned around to walk into the bathroom. However, after taking 2 steps, he suddenly stopped and frowned. Magic Device Institute, 5th year? Isn't that the same year as Pan Duola Sr.? Splash. The sudden sound of water interrupted his thoughts. He turned around to look at the source of the sound and noticed that the faucet of the sink had been turned on. The clear liquid that flowed out of the faucet quickly filled the sink. Then, the faucet of the first sink automatically turned off. The faucet of the second sink was turned on and water continued to flow out. After a while, the 2 sinks were completely filled. Dake walked to the edge of the sinks and looked at the sinks with a puzzled expression. The sinks were calm and clear. There was no mystery behind them at all. However, under normal circumstances, the puzzle-solving mechanism of this resource site should be in the sinks. 2 sinks. Is it a choice between the 2? Just as he was thinking this, the surface of the 2 sinks rippled at the same time. A stream of water flowed out of the sinks and slowly transformed into 2 human-shaped water spirits. The left side was flat, male. The right side was bumpy, female. Just as Dake was alarmed, the female water spirit on the right opened her mouth and said in a soft voice, "Vampire, please answer the question." Then, the male water spirit on the left repeated, "Vampire, please answer the question." Dake looked around and couldn't make a choice. The 2 water spirits called him Vampire the moment they opened their mouths. It should be the information from the branch card. It should be the identity he currently had. Since the branch card was the key to activate the checkpoint, it was normal for this part of the information to be leaked. Dake didn't have any doubts about this. However, there must be a reason why the water spirits called him Vampire. It seems like their questions will most likely be related to vampire. Dake muttered, "Do you want me to choose one of you to answer the question? What's the difference between your questions?" However, the 2 water spirits still mechanically said, "Vampire, please answer the question." Dake couldn't help but think. Since the student is asked to choose one of the 2, there must be a difference. The professors won't say things without thinking. There must be a difference between the questions of these 2 water spirits, and it's a difference that can be determined before the choice is made. But the only difference between them is their gender. Could it be the difference in gender? One needs to answer a question related to a female vampire, and the other needs to answer a question related to a male vampire? Dake's eyes flashed as he caught the key point. Then he decisively chose to answer the question related to a female vampire. "You." He reached out his finger and poked the female water spirit's forehead. Suddenly, a cool feeling flowed from his fingertip into his heart, making him feel a little comfortable. "Pata." The male water spirit on the left suddenly collapsed. The female water spirit on the right said, "Question 1. Who is the greatest female vampire in history? Please say her name in 30 seconds. Dake. He never thought that the water fairy would ask such a question. But if it was the greatest vampire, there shouldn't be anyone greater than the true ancestor of vampires, right? But the true ancestor of vampires wasn't just one. Even Dake, who had limited understanding of vampires, knew that the true ancestor of vampires was inherited. Then, the answer was the first true ancestor of vampires? But the question was the first true ancestor a female? What was her name? Can you ask a question that a normal person can answer? If I knew the name of the first true ancestor, I wouldn't be standing here answering your question. 30 seconds passed in the blink of an eye. Doc died before he could even start the battle. He was defeated on the first question. But the water spirit didn't announce his failure. Instead, she continued to ask the second question. Question 2. How long does a female vampire's fangs change? Please answer within 30 meters. The exact time will be measured in years. After Dake heard this, he couldn't help but complain, there's a difference between male and female teeth? Is a male's fangs change shorter than a female's? But he was very clear about the answer to this question. After all, he did research on vampires' fangs. So, he directly said, 100 years. Correct. The water spirit raised her 2 small hands and clapped. She continued, Question 3. How long does a female vampire's pregnancy take? Please answer the question within 30 seconds. Dake raised his eyebrows and said decisively, It's very difficult for vampires to give birth. Generally, a female vampire's pregnancy time is 3 times that of a normal human's. That's 280 days multiplied by 3, which is 840 days. If 30 days is a month, then it's 28 months. Correct. The water spirit clapped her hands mechanically again. Question 4. Dake chose the question of a female vampire from a male and a female vampire. Of course, there was a reason. In order to take care of the vampire's daughter Victoria, he specially looked up relevant information. Moreover, even if he didn't look up, he could speculate the answers to some questions from Victoria's behavior pattern. The following questions were difficult and easy. He could at least answer some, and even if he couldn't, he tried his best to guess the answers. He really guessed a lot of the answers. When the water fairy finally stopped asking, he had already answered 30 questions. In the end, the water spirit said, the time for answering questions is over. The number of questions you answered correctly is 19, the number of questions you answered incorrectly is 9, and the number of questions you gave up is 2. A correct answer will add 1 point, a wrong answer will deduct 1 point, and no points will be deducted if you give up. The final score is 10 points. If the final score is 10 or more, you will be evaluated as a pass. Congratulations, you have successfully passed this round. Please wait for a moment. Wait, points will be deducted if I answer wrong, but no points will be deducted if I give up? 10 points pass. Does that mean I failed below 10 points? Then 20 points is good? 30 points is excellent? Dake stared at the water spirit and said in surprise, Which professor designed this puzzle? Did they purposely not announce the rules of the test beforehand? And these evaluations, what impact will it have on the future? Facing Dake's questions, the water spirit had no intention of answering. It stood on the surface of the water and placed its 2 small hands on its abdomen. Its face maintained a faint smile, and its eyes looked straight ahead with a clear conscience. Time passed by like flowing water. The air in the bathroom gradually became humid. Doc furrowed his brows slightly. He could faintly hear some fragmented sounds that made his hair stand on end. Pa! The water spirit's body suddenly exploded. The plug in the pool opened automatically. The water in the pool flowed into the pipe. The eerie sound that was like a ghost crying gradually became obvious. Pada! Dake took a step back. The water under his feet splashed because of this. However, water? He looked down and saw that the originally dry ground was silently submerged by water. The water rose quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it was above the heel of his shoes. Pa! A gust of cold wind blew, and the door of the bathroom was suddenly closed. The dream demon, who was guarding outside, instantly passed through the door and poked her head in. However, Big Milk Can was locked outside. Dake was alarmed. He immediately took out a obstruction spell card from his card bag and summoned an air cube under his feet. The water continued to spread upward. Suddenly, a splash sound came from the squatting cubicle in the bathroom. It was as if something had crawled out of the pool, and a large amount of water slid down its body. Then, the door of one of the cubicles was suddenly pushed open. A ghost, with disheveled hair, crawled out of the cubicle. It's out. Dake suddenly focused his attention and sized it up. He didn't know if it was because he had chosen the female water spirit, but the ghost that crawled out of the cubicle was a female ghost with disheveled hair. The female ghost's hair was wet, and her entire face was covered by black hair. He couldn't even see her neck. Only a curved horn grew on the top of her head, and it was scarlet and eye-catching. However, from the bottom half of her body, it was a giant python with a thick waist. It's a ghost snake. Information about ghost snake flashed through Dake's mind. Ghost snake was half ghost and half snake. It was an undying species of the ghost type, but it was a materialized ghost type. Ghost snakes had a large population. From young to mature, from 1 star to 9 stars, there was a huge difference between a strong ghost snake and a weak ghost snake. In the legends that stopped children from crying, ghost snakes fed on human babies. They would crawl out of the bathroom pipes in the middle of the night and eat disobedient children alive. The ghost snake in front of him was covered in moisture and black energy. The entire bathroom became eerie and terrifying because of its appearance. As an elite-level ghost of the 7th floor resource point, it was at least as strong as an 8-star magic spirit. However, if it was only an 8-star magic spirit, then, just as Dake was about to fight, the doors of 2 other cubicles were pushed open at the same time. 2 more ghost snakes slowly slithered out of the cubicles. There were a total of 3 ghost snakes. Each of them exuded a terrifying aura. At this moment, Dake finally understood the difference between 10 points and 30 points, and between passing and excellent. I'm afraid that if I get 20 points and 30 points in the answering segment, I only need to face 2 and 1 ghost snake, respectively. However, it's not much different. I can only get 19 points at most. Dake quickly calmed down and entered battle mode. There are a total of 3 ghost snakes. If I rely solely on the Diru beast, or the demon beast, I'm afraid I won't even be able to defeat one of them. If I want to break through this resource point, I can't keep it no matter what. I spent nearly 10 minutes answering the questions just now. The demon beast still has less than 5 minutes to evolve. After it degenerates, I can use Bliss 3 to evolve it into a black Diru beast. Then, it can fuse with the Diru beast to form a Basti beast. If I use Pride, I can summon a dragon egg and hatch a Green Eyes White Dragon. Although the Basti beast and the Green Eyes White Dragon are both 7-star, even if these 3 ghost snakes are strengthened elite-level monsters, I still have a chance to defeat them. But if it's a one-on-one battle, I'm still 1 less. Should I use Moon God equipment? Hiss. While Dake was thinking quickly, the 3 ghost snakes had already slithered out from the depths of the washroom. Although the washroom wasn't small, it was still terrifyingly crowded as a battlefield against 3 8-star monsters. In such an environment, not to mention whether the 3 ghost snakes could be used quickly, the Green Eyes White Dragon couldn't be used no matter what. Diru beast, break through the door. Demon beast, attack. Dake saw the situation clearly and immediately gave the order. At this moment, the obstruction spell cube had already covered the water surface. Dake felt a wave of wetness under his feet. He lifted his feet and quickly moved towards the door. The demon beast, who was flying in the air with its wings, roared and raised its 2 thick and long arms, using 10,000 claws of death. As the power of darkness surged, huge claws of death condensed in front of it and suddenly shot out. The next moment, the Diru beast held the single scabbard and threw it back. With a bang, the layer of ghost-type energy covering the door was completely eliminated. The big milk can outside the door finally successfully pushed open the washroom door. Then, a large amount of water surged out from the door, causing the big milk can, who was caught off guard, to slide backward. Dake seized the opportunity and immediately jumped over, successfully escaping from the washroom by stepping on the water. The Diru beast was naturally even more agile and quickly jumped out. However, in the next second, the demon beast's scream came from the washroom. The 4-star magic guide sprite, Demon Beast, whose 3 stats were all at 2,000 points, had been insta-killed by the 3 ghost snakes, before it could even use instant teleportation. After Dake escaped from the washroom, he quickly turned around, only to see one of the ghost snake's long black hair shoot out and easily break the 10,000 claws of death. Then, the black hair continued to extend. Although he didn't see it, the demon beast was most likely shot to death by this black hair. A long-range attack And it doesn't seem to have a cooldown. Dake's heart sank quickly. After the demon beast was instantly killed, the Basti beast summoning condition was missing. The fusion plan died prematurely before it could be used. However, there was only one Pride that could raise some magic guide sprites to 7-star. Even the primordial dragon egg couldn't hatch a 7-star cyanized white dragon without using Pride. He was undoubtedly in a predicament. Bad luck. 3 ghost snakes. In the lounge, Professor Li, who didn't miss any of Dake's performances, was happily watching his performance while eating peanuts and drinking wine. Professor Bacon, who was beside her, leaned over to take a look and couldn't help but switch his point of view to this side. This time, it wasn't just the professors from the math class who were watching. The other professors who weren't familiar with Dake also couldn't help but switch their point of view to this side. After all, it wasn't common for a second-year student to challenge an 8-star elite monster, and 3 of them at once. In the corner, the Magic Guide language class professor, Holder Bode, had been watching from the moment Dake entered the washroom. This was because the checkpoint of this resource point was designed by Professor Bode. Want to get my ghost snake magic crystal? Then struggle with all your might. When Professor Holder Bode saw the 3 ghost snakes rush out of the washroom, he couldn't help but reveal a slightly sinister smile. The professors were watching very seriously. This time, they didn't make any small bets for fun. They probably all wanted to see what kind of trump card Doc Diamond, who had caused countless disturbances in the academy in the past year or so, had. What should I do? As his mana surged, Dake's mind became more and more active. It was as if he had entered the state of a duel. However, the current situation was even more serious than the one he faced in the Magic Guide duel. Time is limited. Choose between Fairy Beast and Cyan Eyes White Dragon. Dake quickly retreated while pulling out Pride. The Diru beast sensed Pride's aura and immediately turned its head. Me. Its tone was resolute and decisive. Dake suddenly made a decision. After that, he didn't hesitate and instantly raised Pride in his hand up high. In the name of Dake Dimming, I summon Pride. There was less darkness and more light. Pride's radiance was as dazzling as the sun. The fairy hiding in the ceiling couldn't help but close its eyes. This caused the screens of the professor's little mirrors to turn black. Fortunately, the black screen only lasted for a moment. When the fairy reopened its eyes, they saw that Dake Dimming had actually closed his eyes. Then, the fingers holding the Magic Guide card lit up with a white light. Although the white light wasn't as dazzling as the golden light of Pride, it left a deep impression on people. Mind power. Professor Li's eyes shone. Professor Holdell Boyd's deep pupils subconsciously shrank. Many professors sucked in a breath of cold air. This isn't just mind power. He has formed a clear bond with his Magic Guide fairy. Any magister wouldn't neglect the research of mind magic. Only the majority of magisters couldn't get started. And those who had the chance to get started couldn't master it. They only divided the bond between the spirit force and the arcane elf into 2 levels. One was blurred, and the other was clear. The blurred bond could make the Magic Guide fairy respond to the magister's call. The clear bond could create miracles. Dake's mind power continuously shot into the Diru beast's body through the bond between them. The Diru beast held the hilt of the single sword scabbard tightly. Its cheeks were flushed, and the space between its eyebrows was shining. Bathed in Pride's radiance, its body and limbs quickly elongated. It was like a young girl stretching her limbs. Its golden hair spread behind it, and 3 pairs of pure white angel wings drilled out of the radiance and suddenly spread out. Under the power of the bond and the power of the great sin, the 4-star Diru beast successfully evolved into a 7-star fairy beast. A holy and pure aura instantly erupted. Hiss! The 3 ghost snakes that swam out of the bathroom were attacked by this aura and immediately let out a hateful roar. The black gas on their bodies expanded due to this stimulation, crazily spreading in all directions. Little Demon. Little Dream Demon was so frightened that she hid behind Dake's back. But in the next moment, She quietly poked her head out and looked curiously with her eyes wide open. After successfully evolving, the fairy beast once again held the hilt of the single sword scabbard tightly. Its current star level was 7, and the single sword scabbard's attack was increased to 2,100. Its 3 stats were 3,500, 3,600, and 2,000. With the divine transformation support, it jumped to 4,000/4, 100/2, 500. This was not inferior to any 8-star Magic Guide Fairy's 3 stats at all. And after fully displaying the power of the single sword scabbard, it could even increase its attack to 6,200. Leave the rest to me. The fairy beast held the holy sword horizontally in front of its chest, emitting a holy and awe-inspiring aura. Roar! X3 The 3 ghost snakes let out angry roars. The long black hair that covered their faces was blown away by the roars, revealing 3 faces that were not too different from each other. These 3 faces were incomparably skinny, revealing the markings of stork bones. On their originally ugly faces were scarlet snake eyes. The tongues that stretched out from their bloody mouths were forked in the middle, like the forked tongues of snakes. The 3 ghost snakes clearly had an innate hatred for the fairy beast. When the roars stopped, the 3 ghost snakes' auras instantly skyrocketed. Their wet black hair suddenly burst out and shot at the fairy beast. Heaven's purple light. However, in the face of this terrifying attack, the heavenly lady beast merely raised the holy sword in her hand. The holy purple light that erupted from its palm shot up along the sword hilt and mixed with the holy power contained in the single sword scabbard, forming a highly condensed sword energy. This purple sword energy shot out under the fairy beast's control, condensing into a magnificent sword energy that was as large as a door. She held the sword with both hands, pursed her lips, and suddenly slashed down. The magnificent purple sword energy swept across and actually cut off the terrifying black hair of the 3 ghost snakes. More than half of the heaven's purple light's energy was depleted, but the most troublesome attack of the 3 ghost snakes was also sealed. The heavenly lady beast sneered coldly. Then, it flapped its 6 angelic wings and flew toward the 3 ghost snakes. However, the 3 ghost snakes did not flinch because of their hair being cut off. They moved almost at the same time. The ghost snake in the middle suddenly opened its huge mouth and shot out a pitch-black beam of light out of thin air. The fairy beast slashed with its sword, and part of the heaven's purple light on the sword was depleted again. The other 2 ghost snakes raised their heads and hissed. The body of one of the ghost snakes swelled rapidly, and the snake scales on the lower half of the snake body grew as its body grew. The scales quickly spread to the whole body, covering its whole body with a layer of snake scale armor. Even its face was covered with snake scales. It had almost turned into a huge snake monster. The other, ghost snake, maintained a size similar to a human, but it had 2 snake-shaped weapons in its hands. The 2 snake blades seemed to be coated with poison, and they were black and smelly. 2 physical, 1 magic. The 3 ghost snakes attacked the fairy beast. The fairy beast was not weak in terms of aura. However, as a sorcerer, Dake had to have the ability to accurately judge the situation. He didn't put all the pressure on the shoulders of the fairy beast. After the cooldown of the usual summoning spell was over, he took out the Moon God's Soul Eye from his card bag. The Moon God's Soul Eye's armed form was only a 6-star Magic Guide Fairy without using the Moon God Stone to evolve. However, with the bonus of the passive skill, God's Personality Armament, it could increase its 3 sizes to 4,000 points, which was 8 stars. It would not be a problem for him to skillfully control the Moon God's armor and defeat one of the ghost snakes. If the fairy beast could last until the Moon God's soul killed one of the ghost snakes, it would be a one-on-one situation. Of course, this was the best prediction. However, under the current situation, there was nothing to hesitate about. Dake raised the Moon God's Soul Eye and began to summon. Moo! The big milk can grabbed Dake's trousers, its eyes shining. Are you itching for a fight too? Dake could not help but touch the big milk can's head, revealing a slightly regretful expression. Then, he turned the Moon God's Soul Eye's target to the big milk can and chanted, "The gathered prayer shall become a new silver moon. Turn into a shining silver moon." Omd evolution. Moon God. The big milk can's eyes flashed with excitement. Ever since Dake did not need to roll to increase the upper limit of its damage output, it had not exercised for a long time. Although it was suitable for a nanny, every nanny had the heart of a warrior. The fairy beast's activity made it more and more unbearable. At this moment, it actually took the initiative to ask for a fight. Of course, as a professional nanny, it did not forget to make a bottle of milk before it evolved. Dake grabbed the bottle of milk, feeling amused. Then, he saw the shadow of the moon god's soul appear behind the big milk can. Under the light of the silver moon, the big milk can gradually turned into a glowing object. After its body turned into a glowing object, it quickly elongated. Pieces of silver-white armor formed around it. The moment the silver-white armor completed its transformation, it stuck close to the big milk can's skin. When the light faded, the big milk can had evolved into a digital beast that looked nothing like the big milk can, Moon God. Compared to Dake's Moon God form, the big milk can's Moon God form was obviously more feminine. It could be said that it had completely changed from a neutral male to a female with obvious characteristics. However, other than the differences in details, the big milk can's Moon God form was still as sharp as a blade. Its power would not be weakened at all. Prioritize the one hiding behind. Dake reached out his hand and pointed at the ghost snake, which was obviously a magic type. The moment the moon god's toes touched the ground, it turned into a silver-white lightning bolt. At the same time, the fairy beast was already engaged in close combat with the other two melee-type ghost snakes. Relying on the advantage of its weapon and brain, the fairy beast was not at a disadvantage at the beginning of the battle. Once the magic-type ghost snake was taken over by the moon god, the pressure on the fairy beast would be reduced by half. The other two ghost snakes might even be killed by the fairy beast first. The development of the battle was not too different from Dake's deduction. He gradually calmed his mind and was sure that he had won this battle. The magic-type ghost snake was targeted by the moon god, and it no longer had the time to shoot demonic light at the fairy beast. The moon god was completely immune to the ghost snake's transformation skills, and its defense was high enough to withstand the magic light. Although it relied on its strengthened 3 sizes and had powerful close combat abilities, it was only a one-time use magic elf. Without any close combat sure kill skills, it was impossible for it to be a match for the moon god. Although the big milk can didn't fight often, it did have good combat training. It had even learned swordsmanship and fist techniques. After the battle, the magic-type ghost snake was completely suppressed by the big milk can. It was only a matter of time before it was killed. Dake was completely relieved, but he still focused on the battle on both sides. However, while he was focused, the water that flowed out of the bathroom gradually spread to his feet. He was focused on dealing with the 3 ghost snakes and didn't realize that the 3 ghost snakes weren't of the water element. They didn't have the ability to control the water element, so it was impossible for them to flood the bathroom. In the professor's lounge, only a few of the professors who were observing the battle through the mirror realized this. Even if the professors saw something fishy, they only showed more interest in it. This design is really like Professor Bode's style. Professor Bacon shook his head slightly. He grabbed a handful of wine-fermented peanuts from Lily's small plate and stuffed them into his mouth one by one. At that moment, the water that spread to the bottom of Dake's feet suddenly exploded. At that moment, he suddenly felt something strange, but it was too late. The violent water had already rolled up his body. The tentacles that spread out from the water even wrapped around his hands, making it impossible for him to put his hands into his card bag. The water was highly condensed, so there was no moisture. The water that flowed out of the bathroom quickly gathered at that moment and condensed into a tall human-shaped water elemental next to Dake. Although these monsters wouldn't seriously injure the students, controlling the students' bodies and playing tricks like tying them up wasn't prohibited. Some monsters even had hypnotic skills that could make students fall into a deep sleep. If he encountered a more ferocious monster, the consequences would be more serious. The water elemental used to bind Dake gradually turned into a giant hand. Dake was lifted up high by the giant hand, and his body felt the pain of being squeezed. However, the more he was in this kind of situation, the more he needed to stay calm. He obviously inherited the Valkyrie's skills in this aspect. His face with vampire makeup didn't show the slightest bit of panic because of this. That kind of calm to the point of coldness made him produce a completely different range from his usual gentleness. Binding my hands was indeed the right choice, but unfortunately, his mouth was also blocked by a tentacle of the water elemental. However, silently casting summoning spells was a skill that every Shang Molian Academy magus had to master. And long-range magic output was also an ability that every magus duelist had to master. He just pointed his fingertip, and magic burst out and shot into the card bag. He closed his mouth tightly and completed the silent casting in just 3 seconds. One of the magus cards in the card bag was instantly activated. Under the full attention of the professors, Dake's body suddenly glowed, and his body posture rapidly changed at this moment. Many of the professors couldn't help but show a look of astonishment. Even Professor Hulda Bode couldn't help but be moved. Dake Dimming, who was caught by the giant hand of the water elemental, actually shrank rapidly in the light. When the light dissipated, he had completely transformed into a ragdoll cat. Wow! Little Lily suddenly opened her eyes wide. She never knew that Dake had mastered the transformation spell. What a beautiful cat! Professor Bacon, who was beside her, also exclaimed. Some of the professors who were teaching the transformation spell class were even more surprised. After Dake Dimming transformed into a cat, he escaped from the giant hand of the water elemental at lightning speed. The Dream Demon, on the side, mustered up her courage and rushed forward. She released the Gem of Fear on the water elemental monster. 4-2. 5 of 127. It's the last 2 days of October, don't keep the monthly votes. The next performance will be 15,000 votes per day. Chapter 638. Little Demon. Facing the water elemental's giant hand, Little Dream Demon closed her eyes, and the Gem of Fear on her chest released a magical light that shone like a gem. Even though it was only a 3-star magic fairy's ultimate skill, the huge amount of magical power accumulated in the Gem of Fear was released in one go, and it still caused a hindrance to the water elemental. Dake, who had transformed into a cat, took the opportunity to escape. When he used the transformation spell, this time, he only injected a little magical power and limited the duration of the transformation spell to 1 minute. However, this 1 minute wasn't that easy to get through. That water elemental was an 8-star elite monster, and Dream Demon was only able to block it for a moment before it was hit by the elemental water cannon that it shot out. Then, it suddenly raised its arm, and the giant hand actually extended towards the ceiling and became bigger, as if it was going to slap Dake, who had transformed into a cat, into a small biscuit in the next second. In the nick of time, the water elemental's back shone with a holy light. After the fairy beast used the scabbard to block the ghost snake that was holding the snake blade, it flapped its wings and retreated, pulling away from the other ghost snake. Website: https://m Vipkanchu. VIP. As it retreated, the 2 wings on its left wrist gathered into a holy bow amidst the light. It pulled the bowstring with its right hand, and a thunderbolt arrow was condensed at its fingertips, shooting out like a thunderbolt. Heavenly punishment! As soon as the clear voice was heard, the holy arrow, wrapped in the power of thunder, hit the water elemental from behind. The water elemental's body was penetrated by the arrow, and its movements suddenly became sluggish. The electric current that spread from the wound instantly paralyzed it. It couldn't move. The fairy beast's arrow undoubtedly bought Dake the most crucial time. After he successfully pulled away, he finally managed to drag the transformation spell's duration until it was over. He suddenly stood up from his ragdoll form and returned to his human form. The moment he returned to his human form, Dake immediately took out 2 magic cards from his card pack. The magician's secretary quickly flew over and spread out beside him. The magician and the magic fairy chanted at the same time. In the name of Dake Dimming, I summon the first dragon egg. In the name of Dake Dimming, I summon Greed 3. White and blue light burst out from the surface of the 2 magic cards. A huge summoning circle appeared in front of Dake, and a snow-white dragon egg slowly floated out of it. The violet light that symbolized greed passed through the dragon egg and shone on the single scabbard that had returned to the fairy beast's hand. The heavenly lady beast was slightly stunned and immediately responded, "Single scabbard, transform into an elf." The single scabbard vibrated slightly, and the eye in the sword puppet suddenly opened. The ribbon tied to the sword hilt expanded into the shape of an arm. When it transformed into its elf form, it automatically dived into the radiance of Greed 3, and crazily demanded the power of Greed. The heavenly lady beast tried its best to dodge the attacks of the two phantom snakes, until the single scabbard split into two in the radiance and evolved into a double scabbard, with two swords and an oval shield. Then, it suddenly waved its hand and grabbed one of the swords. It flapped its wings and pounced forward again. As for the remaining sword, it used its ribbon tentacles to pick up the shield and shot it in front of Dake like a gust of wind. Dake grabbed the sword hilt, took off the shield, and quickly threw it out. Gotcha! The dragon egg's eggshell instantly shattered. The green-eyed dragon whelp flew out from the shattered eggshell and roared as it grabbed the holy sword that was coming from behind. Although it could not activate the holy sword's divine power, after equipping the holy sword, it could still gain a pure attack buff. Green-eyed dragon whelp was a 6-star light-type dragon whelp, and its attack was as high as 3,000 points. With the double scabbard 1s buff, it could increase its attack by 1,800 points. This meant that the power of its sword could reach as high as 5,800 points of attack. Although it could not be compared to the fairy beast with the single scabbard, it was still very terrifying. However, its weakness was that its magic power and defense were only 2,500 points, and due to its body structure, it could not use its sword skills. When it used its sword skills, it was lower than its fists and claws. However, when facing an 8-star elite-level monster, even if its sword skills were not good enough, it had to bite the bullet. Roar! O*! Green-eyed dragon whelp raised its sword and roared as it charged forward. Dake carefully observed its surroundings. This time, after confirming that there were no abnormalities, it quickly calmed down. It was a huge mistake not to discover the existence of the water elemental in advance. However, the conclusion of the mistake was something that happened after the battle. Green-eyed dragon whelp, let your light shine on the earth, light of Spirit Hall. Green-eyed dragon whelp gathered its energy as it charged towards the water elemental. The holy white light gathered above its head and condensed into a blazing ball of light that was like the sun. It roared as the ball of light rushed into the sky. The holy aura instantly filled the air, and snow-white feathers fell from the sky. When the ball of light exploded, the surrounding environment quickly changed. The entire open space in front of the washroom was bathed in the warm white light of the Light of Spirit Hall. Although the Light of Spirit Hall did not increase the attributes of the light elemental magic guide spirits, allowing a fish to fight in the water and on land would obviously display a completely different battle strength. Green-eyed dragon whelp and fairy beast were like fish in water. However, the three ghost snakes and moon god felt uncomfortable. Although ghost snakes were of the ghost element, they obviously had a portion of the dark element. Moon god was purely of the dark element, which countered the light element. However, fairy beast was the main force at this moment. The light of Spirit Hall's existence could allow fairy beast to be reborn in the form of a spirit even if it fell. There was no room for failure in this battle. Green-eyed dragon whelp, who lacked an effective killing move, was at a disadvantage in the battle against water elemental. However, although it was in a sorry state, it was barely able to hold on with the help of double sword sheath 1. Fairy beast was fighting 1 against 2, but it had the upper hand. However, it was unable to take down its opponent in a short period of time. The breakthrough point was Moon God. Again, Big Milk Can, who had evolved into Moon God, indicated that it also needed a sword. Unfortunately, its owner could no longer satisfy it. Big Milk Can, end this quickly. Not only could it not satisfy it, but it also gave it a mission that was almost impossible. There was no other way. Moon God suddenly jumped into the air and dodged another demonic light from Ghost Snake. Then, it used its strongest killing move, lunar eclipse, under the screech of the magic elemental ghost snake. It raised its right hand, and the bright moonlight was drawn in from outside the castle and gathered above it. A sea of moonlight lit up the sky. Moon God concentrated on gathering energy until the bright moonlight illuminated every corner of the surroundings. Then, it suddenly yelled and slashed its hand down. Almost at the same time, ripples appeared one after another from the sea of moonlight, and the light beam condensed by the moonlight burst out and landed on the head of the magic elemental ghost snake. Boom! The magic elemental ghost snake's head was hit by the lunar eclipse light beam in the moonlight, and its entire head seemed to explode. The black hair that was cut off scattered and evaporated, and it was almost bald. However, it relied on its strengthened defense to forcefully withstand the first beam of moonlight. Then, it suddenly raised its head and screeched, and the ghostly energy gathered above its head to form a pitch-black barrier. The second and third beams of moonlight fell one after another after that moment, continuously bombarding the pitch-black barrier. The magic elemental ghost snake's ugly face revealed a look of madness, and it madly injected its demonic power into the barrier. The fourth, fifth, and sixth beams of moonlight shot down. The barrier finally couldn't hold on and completely shattered. Its entire body was completely exposed under the remaining moonlight. Moon God stood in the air, emitting moonlight like a god. It raised its eyebrows and blasted down the remaining 6 beams of moonlight. That magic elemental ghost snake finally turned into ashes under the terrifying lunar eclipse. The first one, Dake said softly. After completely killing the ghost snake, Moon God only took a moment to catch its breath before charging towards the petite ghost snake that was holding the snake blade. That gigantic ghost snake was too difficult for it to deal with. Fairy Beast also quickly cooperated and attacked the remaining gigantic ghost snake with all its might. In a one-on-one situation, its advantage was even more obvious. The double scabbard in its hand slashed open the ghost snake's snake scales, cut off its claws, and completely cut off the curved horn on its head. Bathed in the white light of spiritual hall, Fairy Beast was like a fish in water, and it killed the ghost snake on the spot. Awoo! The cyanide baby dragon that was struggling to hold on had its defenses broken by the water elemental's all-pervasive attacks. It couldn't withstand the full attack of an 8-star monster at all. In the blink of an eye, it was in danger and transformed into a dragon egg at the last moment. That water elemental once again faced Dake. However, Dake didn't panic at all. Moon Goddess had already forced away the ghost snake that was holding the snake blade. It stepped on the void and flew over. The fairy beast that killed the gigantic ghost snake took over the ghost snake that was left behind. A moment later, Moon Goddess had already grabbed the double scabbard that the cyanide baby dragon had let go of. It was overjoyed and pounced on the water elemental without fear. Thank you for your hard work. Dake didn't hatch the primordial dragon egg again. Instead, he took the dragon egg form into consideration for the upcoming battle and stored it back into the magic card. This battle had developed to this point, and if there were no accidents, it wouldn't be dangerous anymore. Although it was difficult for Moon Goddess to hurt the water elemental that was almost immune to physical attacks, as long as the fairy beast was free, it could activate the Holy Sword's power and work with Moon Goddess to kill the water elemental. Relying on the Milkkin's milk, the fairy beast recovered to its peak state during the battle and quickly killed the last ghost snake. Although there were upperclassmen who walked by and watched, they didn't interfere. The professors who were watching in the lounge relaxed one after another. Professor Holdell Boyd showed an even more sinister smile, but it might just be his face. The water elemental didn't struggle too much under the combined efforts of the fairy beast and Moon Goddess. When the Hall of Light reached its end point, the pure angel's feathers scattered in all directions. The water elemental's gigantic body was pierced by a sword and instantly exploded. Clear water sprinkled down like rain, and the ground was damp again. However, the most difficult battle in the masquerade ball had finally come to an end. Dake took a deep breath and summoned Moon Goddess and Fairy Beast to his side. Now, it's time to reap the rewards. Breaking through the 7th floor's resource point gave him a considerable amount of credits. However, the most important thing was the materials left behind in this resource point. Dake held the magician secretary in his hand and led the magician managers into the washroom again. At this time, there were no traces of water on the washroom's floor, and the gloomy atmosphere had completely disappeared. The moonlight from the window at the end illuminated the room, and everything seemed unusually peaceful. Dake found a gift box floating in the air on the sink. "There's only one?" he said with slight disappointment. However, when he thought that if he answered all the questions correctly, he might only summon one ghost, and he was relieved. The professors wouldn't put 3 or even 4 portions of resources in a resource point. "Open it and take a look," the Fairy Beast said with her arms crossed. Dark nodded, picked up the gift box and opened it. There was indeed only one ghost snake's magical crystal in the gift box. However, under the crystal, there was a elemental bead with the water attribute. The so-called elemental bead was the product of highly condensed elements of various types, and it was suitable for refining various types of magic cards. The quality of the elemental bead was determined by its purity. Dake didn't know much about the quality of the elemental bead, but he could feel that the elemental bead in his hand was very pure, and its quality was definitely not low. If I use the foxgrass to cultivate the fruit of jealousy, I might be able to refine a water ibu, like the fairy ibu. Dake pondered for a while and looked at the ghost snake's magical crystal. He had never seen the ghost snake's magical crystal before, but this black crystal that contained the energy of the ghost element had patterns on its surface that were extremely similar to the ghost snake scales. He guessed that it was similar to the ghost snake. For items like this, if I mastered the ghost snake's directional refining method, I should be able to refine a ghost snake, right? Since this ghost snake, an elite-level ghost, appeared at the masquerade ball, the refining method of the ghost snake must have been obtained from one of the professors. But this ghost snake... Thinking of the ghost snake's withered, ugly, and terrifying face, Dake shuddered slightly. The magic fairy that he refined wasn't like the other magister's magic fairies, which mostly stayed in magic cards. Just thinking about having such a terrifying ghost snake by his side in the future gave him goosebumps. But if I don't use it to refine the ghost snake, how can I use this crystal? Dake couldn't help but ponder. The ghost snake's magical crystal and the water elemental bead were definitely extremely high-grade materials. His goal of taking the risk to enter the 7th floor could be said to have been achieved, and he should have been very surprised. Surprise, surprise. Dake forced himself to open his mouth and smile as much as he could. Then, he put away these 2 items and prepared to return to the lower floor before the Fairy Beast and Celestial Moon arrived. There was only one resource point left on the 7th floor, and he didn't want to waste any more time exploring it. Next, he still needed to make up for the 9 resource points as soon as possible so that he could obtain the credits reward that he needed to break through the 20 resource points. Now that the credits were being consumed faster and faster, he wouldn't give up any opportunity to obtain a large number of credits. If I'm lucky, it'll be great if I can encounter a group of 7-star ghosts as soon as possible. Don't you think so? Fairy Beast. Heh. The Fairy Beast snorted coldly and turned her head to the side. The Celestial Moon hugged Dake's body from behind, indicating that it would be faster this way. Then let's go. Dake didn't refuse. When the Fairy Beast and Celestial Moon's evolution time ended, Dake finally returned to the 6th floor. Unfortunately, he didn't encounter a group of ghosts during this period, only 2 or 3 of them who didn't have eyes. After returning to the 6th floor, he stored the Diru Beast and Big Milk Can into the magic cards, then chose Meow Meow, Wrestling Hawkman, and Single Scabbard, that had transformed into a fairy. With these 3 magic fairies, of course, it was impossible to stay on the 6th floor for long. Therefore, these 3 magic fairies were mainly responsible for scouting the way and responding at critical moments. Once they couldn't hide, they would definitely encounter ghosts. They would use the candy tactic, sprinkle a handful of candy, and quickly escape. In short, they would do it as quickly as possible. Fortunately, the ghosts on the 6th floor had almost been cleared. Those senior students who weren't able to gain a foothold on the 7th floor had almost cleared the 6th floor of the castle. Dake didn't encounter too much danger. He successfully went from the 6th floor to the 5th floor. This was the first time he set foot on the 5th floor tonight. The ghosts on the 5th floor of the castle were mainly 5-star, but in fact, there were also some 4-star ones. The outstanding third years weren't satisfied with the strength of the ghosts on the 4th floor, so they would challenge the 5th floor. The 4th years who weren't very good at duels would also choose the 5th floor as their hunting spot. This could be said to be the center of the intersection between the 3rd and 4th years. Of course, occasionally, there would be students from higher years who would go down to the 5th floor for efficiency. Everyone's considerations were different, and the resulting actions would also be different. Dake didn't stop on the 5th floor. This time, he went straight down to the 4th floor. With only 3-star and 4-star magic fairies by his side, the 4th floor was the safest and fastest. His goal wasn't the ghosts that had almost been cleared, but the resource points. The lower the floor, the lower the efficiency of conquering the resource points. The students who chose the 4th floor as their hunting ground should be the best of the 2nd or even 1st years, as well as ordinary 3rd years. The number of outstanding people in the 1st and 2nd years was relatively small, and the speed at which ordinary 3rd years conquered resource points was actually relatively slow. This made the probability of unconquered resource points relatively high. Of course, in theory, the number of resource points left on the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st floors would also be higher. Especially on the 1st floor, there would definitely be a lot left. On the other hand, because the 8th and 9th floors were too difficult, there should be a lot of resource points left. But that had nothing to do with Dake. He was determined to not waver in his goal and quickly searched the 4th floor according to the resource map. If it was already past the scheduled 8:30 p.m., he had to hurry. When it was 9 o'clock sharp, Dark successfully found 2 more resource points that had yet to be broken through and quickly broke through them. At 9:30 p.m., Dake found 3 more unconquered resource points. Similarly, he didn't waste too much time. But after that, the number of unconquered resource points that could be found decreased. It seemed that the other students had also started to focus on conquering resource points quickly. Dake only managed to snatch another resource point at 10 p.m. At this point, he had conquered a total of 17 resource points. There are still 3 more to go. After careful consideration, Dake decisively went from the 4th floor to the 3rd floor, arriving at the floor that the 2nd-year students were supposed to occupy. On the 1st floor, he also saw many first-year students. After that, he spent about 30 minutes and finally conquered the last 20 resource points. I finally succeeded. Looking at the large number of credits he had obtained after conquering 20 resource points, Dake couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Starting from 6 p.m. sharp, high-intensity running and battling all the way until 10:30 p.m., he had spent a total of 4 hours and 30 minutes. He had finally completed all the tasks for this year's masquerade ball. And now, it was finally time for the party. Cyan-Eye Dragonwhelp, Lion Beast, Scabbard, Fairy Ibu, Milk Can, Deeru Beast. Are they all ready? After confirming that all the Magic Elven cards had been replenished and that all the Magic Elven cards weren't on cooldown, Dake opened his mouth and revealed his vampire fangs. There's still an hour and 20 minutes before the masquerade ball ends. The upperclassmen on the upper floors should have already started partying, right? I wonder if I can make it in time if I join now. Dake went up, summoning all the way. Lion Beast, Deeru Beast, Scabbard, Little Devil Beast, as well as the Magician Secretary, that hadn't been recalled all followed him up. When he entered the 5th floor, Dake saw the werewolf and vampire, who were constantly looking for people to duel, as well as the ghost and witch, who were waiting at the side. When he returned to the 6th floor, Dake saw D. Anna and Luo C, who were scattering sugar everywhere. He took a step back so that D. Anna and Luo C wouldn't notice him. Then, he immediately turned to the other side and quickly left. The 6th floor was the most suitable floor for him. Most of the ghosts that wandered on the 6th floor were within his hunting range. and the third, fourth, and fifth years that stayed on the sixth floor were also within his hunting range. Choosing the most suitable targets, having a 3-second duel, and enjoying the happiness that came with the identity of a vampire, was his goal. The third-year seniors should be the most suitable targets for warming up. Although most of them didn't perform well last year, the third-year students who could stand firm on the sixth floor definitely can't be judged with common sense. I wonder if Senior Mary Bond is on the sixth floor? I was too focused on finding resource points tonight, so many of my acquaintances didn't discover her. Of course, if I can find the fourth-year senior Michael Owen, it would be pretty good too. Dake was like a real vampire who had smelled the scent of blood, and he greedily looked for targets to suck. He was pretty lucky. In just 2 minutes, he followed the sounds and found the prey that had gathered together. Are all the prey nowadays so unvigilant? Dake sighed. In a relatively spacious corridor, a senior and a senior were dueling. The senior was wearing a penguin suit that only revealed his head. He looked very bloated, but his movements were surprisingly agile. He kept dodging the long-range attacks that the opponent's magic elf launched. The senior was wearing a suit and a navy cap, looking valiant and formidable. To be honest, Dake didn't recognize any of them. But that didn't stop him from recognizing those onlookers. It was very likely that the people around him were hiding ghosts, but there were a total of 6 of them watching. Although these 6 people were hiding behind a pillar, they didn't have any other defensive measures. Now that the 6th floor was basically cleared of ghosts, they didn't have to worry about being attacked by ghosts that suddenly appeared. Wait, it can't be that all 6 of them are ghosts, right? Sigh, maybe there's also an immortal bird that's immune to all abilities. With this thought in mind, Dake walked over without hiding anything. In order to successfully activate Steel, a ghost had to stay within 10 meters and follow the other party for more than 3 minutes without being discovered. There were 2 meanings of without being discovered. One was to not be seen. The other was to not be pointed out. Dake wasn't sure at first, but after experiencing it, he understood that seeing but not being pointed out was still considered not being discovered. The school card wasn't that intelligent. One had to do the act of discovering the other party in order to make a judgment. Therefore, inadvertently hearing the other party's footsteps or shadow but not reacting was not considered discovery. Dake's footsteps were obviously noticed. The 6 onlookers immediately turned to look at him. Then, 2 of them immediately raised their fingers in front of their lips and shushed him. Dake winked at one of the 6 people and slowly took out his school card. He wasn't worried that there would be a witch among the 6 people. Firstly, if he used some skills, the other party wouldn't be able to determine whether he was a werewolf or a vampire. Secondly, even if 5% of his credits were taken away, he could still earn it back from the prey. 10% against 5%. As long as the prey's credits were more than half of his, he would make a profit. And a senior who could stand firmly on the 6th floor shouldn't have less than half of his credits, right? Therefore, as long as he won the duel, it would be fine. Senior Zach Wilson, this is the first time I've officially greeted you. I wonder if you have time to spar with me? 5th year, Noble House, Zach Wilson. He was a member of the Noble History Research Society and a member of the Duel Club. At the same time, he was also the commentator for the rookie competition. It could be said that he was a familiar stranger. In fact, Dake didn't give Zach Wilson any room to refuse. Zach Wilson wore a black suit and a blood-red cloak. His collar was pulled up high and he had fangs in his mouth. Although he didn't have wings, it was obvious that he was dressed as a vampire. When he saw Dake Dim-eng, who was also dressed as a vampire, raise his school card, his expression instantly changed. As a commentator who was gradually becoming a professional, he had a good understanding of Dake Dim-eng's strength. Because of this, he was very clear that Dake's set of cards could be limited in a magic duel. In this kind of instant duel, it was very terrifying. Although he was already a 5th-year student, his strength was actually quite average. In this academy, time and grade were no longer the standard to judge a student's strength. The difference in strength between a top student and an ordinary student was very likely to cross several grades. Among them, Pan Duola Doragon and Winnie Scarty, as well as the second-year Dake Dimming in front of him, were very prominent representatives. But after a flash of light on Dake's school card, he felt the vibration of his own school card. Vampirism, ability, activate. The two school cards connected on the spot. Two blood-red lines of magic emerged from Dake's feet and quickly spread along the arc, quickly reaching the bottom of Zach Wilson's feet. Thus, on the ground between the two, a dual field, less than 3 meters long, was built. In the center of the field, a 300-second countdown to the duel instantly popped up. The school cards of the two duelists were also connected to the barrier outside the castle at the same time, creating a spherical transparent barrier outside their bodies. The battle was unavoidable. I don't think I have any grudges with him on the surface, right? Zach Wilson couldn't help but smile bitterly. Of course, he couldn't have guessed the most direct reason why he was chosen as the target of vampirism. It was only because he looked familiar. Moreover, in this masquerade ball, the hunting of the vampire and the werewolf didn't need a reason. It was just like how, as a ghost, he was also stealing other people's credits. Boom! When the duel started, the other 5 people who were squeezed together with Zach Wilson immediately scattered with their magic fairy. The two duelists who were dueling on the other side instantly discovered everyone here and made a clear, discovery action. F***CK. The ghost among the 5 immediately cursed in his heart. Then, someone immediately encouraged, Zach Wilson, the opponent is only a second-year student. You can't possibly be unable to beat him, right? How can that be? Zach Wilson laughed dryly and immediately hid behind the magic fairy beside him. Due to the limited recovery rate of magic power, the effects of the magic rejuvenation potion would continue to decline after consuming too much in a short period of time. Thus, the majority of students only placed a magic fairy beside them in order to conserve magic power. Zach Wilson's magic fairy was a 6-star, Shrieking Gorilla. The Shrieking Gorilla was a very unique magic fairy. Although it was strong, muscular, and its upper body was as broad as a mountain, it wore a tight black vest, black thick-rimmed sunglasses, Hawaiian shorts, and a skirt made of banana peel. This outfit wasn't Zach Wilson's special hobby, but its natural equipment. It was called the Shrieking Set, among the killing moves, and it was a passive killing move. This Shrieking Set could absorb a special power called Shrieking Energy. As long as someone screamed for it around the Shrieking Gorilla, it could absorb the Shrieking Energy. The louder and more screams, the more shrieking energy it absorbed. This shrieking energy would be used to strengthen the Shrieking Set. It made the Shrieking Set cooler and more handsome. Roar! The Shrieking Gorilla raised its hands, showed its muscles, and patted its chest fiercely, showing its white and neat teeth to Dake. Zach Wilson hid behind the Shrieking Gorilla and immediately took out a magic card to summon. He didn't dare to underestimate Dake at all. The first move was the strongest trump card that he had accidentally refined. Beside Dake, the Lion Beast saw that the Diru Beast had no intention of stepping forward, so it took a step forward and punched out Beast King Fist. The lion-shaped shock wave blasted into the Shrieking Gorilla's chest from the front. But the Shrieking Gorilla suddenly stared, pressed its chest, and roared. The roar from its mouth turned into substance, and it completely shattered the Beast King Fist of the Lion Beast. The two sturdy magic guide fairies fiercely punched each other in the next moment. Due to the slight disadvantage in strength, the Lion Beast was blasted back half a step by the punch. But it immediately pulled out the Lion King pill from its waist. Its eyes were bloodshot, and it slashed at lightning speed. The Shrieking Gorilla raised its hand to block, but the Lion King pill cut a very deep wound. But it wasn't afraid at all. It turned around and kicked the Lion Beast. The Lion Beast stabilized its lower body and welcomed the kick. The Lion King pill in its hand quickly sank and stabbed into the Shrieking Gorilla's chest. With this stab, the Lion Beast approached, and the ancestral demon sword stabbed into the Shrieking Gorilla's body. Roar! The Shrieking Gorilla finally screamed. In this extremely close confrontation, the Lion Beast, with a lower star level, actually had the upper hand. But this confrontation couldn't determine the outcome. Zach Wilson hid behind and had successfully completed the usual summoning in this gap. His eyes flashed. After injecting as much magic power as possible, he immediately aimed the magic card at Dake. After a moment, above Dake's head, countless blades appeared in an instant. Magic spell card. Blade Array Hell. The densely packed blades flickered with snow-white brilliance. Zach Wilson suddenly shouted, "The outcome is decided." Blade Array Hell was a large-scale attack, and there were also short blades hidden in the big blade. With dark small magic elves that didn't have any AoE killing skills, it was impossible for them to completely block the attack of this curse card. The blades falling from the sky would completely tear him apart. Of course, it was impossible. It would only cause a lot of damage to the barrier. Even if the damage of one blade was not enough, so many blades could always accumulate to 2,000 points of damage. In the blink of an eye, countless blades rained down from the sky. Dake Dimming dodged. Yes, he dodged. Without relying on any magic elves, he flashed out of the range of Blade Array Hell. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Zach Wilson's curse words burst out of his mouth. When Dake flashed out of the range of Blade Array Hell, the Diru beast also dodged easily. Of course, the single scabbard in its hand also dodged easily. Only the flying speed of the little demon beast was not enough to dodge. But the little demon beast had already disappeared. Zach Wilson immediately felt the barrier behind him shake violently, and his energy counter instantly jumped to the full value of 2,000 points. GGG. The demon beast that appeared once again spread its wings and sneered behind him. Battle ended. In less than a round, this word appeared in the center of the duel arena. Zach Wilson clearly knew that Dake had a magic elf that could instant transmission, but because of his lack of combat experience, he was instantly killed. However, wasn't it normal for a game commentator to not know how to play games like a game coach not knowing how to play games? Zach Wilson's defeat was only a matter of time. "Thank you for letting me win." Dake waved the branch card in his hand and said with a smile. Just now, he received a gift from Senior Zach Wilson. "Forget it." Zach Wilson sighed and took out his branch card, wanting to confirm his loss. However, from the crowd that had just dispersed, a person suddenly walked over quickly and whispered into his ear. Zach Wilson glanced at him and shook his head slightly. The student wearing a tight leather jacket and a funny mask froze on the spot for a moment. Then, he suddenly raised his head and walked toward Dake. At the same time, he raised the branch card that he had already drawn and pointed it at Dake. Dake looked up and saw the word, witch, written on the card. "Hello, I'm a witch." The witch, wearing a funny mask, walked in front of Dake. Dake had expected this and said calmly, "Hello, witch." But the witch obviously didn't like being called a witch, and his tone became a bit more nasty. "Don't think about dueling with me. Everyone's ability will enter a 3-minute cooldown after using it. In these 3 minutes, I'll run to a place where you won't be able to find me." Dake, the witch continued, "You're a werewolf or a vampire. If I use my ability now, there's a 50% chance that my guess will be correct." Dake smiled and said, "Senior Zach Wilson didn't tell you my identity?" The witch said angrily, "He didn't. He should have told me. That way, I can help him take revenge." Dake couldn't help but be curious. "Since he didn't tell you, aren't you afraid that you'll guess wrong? If the witch's divination guesses wrong, won't you have to pay 10% of your credits instead? I advise you to be kind." The witch shook his head and said calmly, "Of course, I have my considerations. Your vampire disguise has completely exposed your identity. Be prepared for me to take 5% of your credits." Dake couldn't help but blink. The witch looked at his expression and became more certain. "I'll use my ability, divination. Your identity is a werewolf. Wearing the vampire costume is to hide your werewolf identity. You're really too smart for your own good." Both sides' branch cards immediately vibrated after the divination ended. The witch couldn't wait to take the branch card and check it. Then, her expression changed. Dake laughed and raised his hand across his abdomen. He bowed slightly and said, "Thank you for your hospitality. I'm very grateful." He couldn't have imagined that there would be such an unexpected gain after winning the duel. And the credits he gained were even more than the credits he got from Vampiric. When fortune came, it was really unstoppable. Although I really want to know who Senior is, I don't think Senior is willing to reveal his identity at this time. So, I won't ask any more. Dake waited until the demonic beast flew back to his side. He waved at the witch, and said in a friendly manner, "Then, goodbye, Senior. Good luck." After he finished speaking, he glanced at the rest of the people and turned to leave. Of course, he couldn't just catch a fleece. There were more fat sheep waiting for him on the 6th floor of the castle. Damn it! After Dake left, the witch suddenly roared angrily and then suddenly turned to Zach Wilson. Of course, he knew that there was more than one ghost hidden in this group of people. If he wanted to recover his losses, he could only start from them. However, the 5 of them, including Zach Wilson, suddenly dispersed. The witch, whose ability was also in a 3-minute cooldown, was suddenly flustered and exasperated. The vampire Dake Dimming, who was in a good mood, found another group of targets after 3 minutes. In fact, on the 6th floor of the castle, it was much easier to find students than ghosts. After most of the students couldn't find any ghosts or resource points to hunt, they focused on the identity game. Many people were addicted to it after they gained something and couldn't stop. On the way to find targets, Dake even met 2 vampires, or werewolves, but they were all disappointed because he was a vampire. But now, he stood in front of 2 fourth-year seniors and challenged one of them to a duel. "It's decided to be you." The 2 fourth-year seniors were wearing school uniforms, but their faces were covered with masks, so it was possible to identify their year and school. Of course, there was also the possibility of deliberately pretending to be students from other schools or using their own old school uniforms. But being killed by a failed hunt was also part of the experience. Uncertainties, on the contrary, made people excited. Dake chose the senior who was wearing the seal mask. As for the other senior, because she was wearing the sea eel mask, he didn't make a move. But after he showed his school card to the seal senior, she took off her mask and said helplessly, "Happy Halloween, Dake Dimming." "Happy Halloween, Senior Betty." Dake couldn't help but smile awkwardly. He deliberately chose the seal mask because Betty Murray's mask in the Marine Order was the sea eel mask. He didn't expect these 2 seniors to play a game of swapping masks. "Do you want to duel with me?" Senior Betty looked at the duel field that was being built and asked casually. "Sorry, Senior, there's no turning back," Dake said. Senior Betty tidied her bangs that were messed up because of the mask and said, "But I'm not interested in a duel. How about this, you let your demon beast attack me once, and I'll take it as my loss." Dake frowned slightly and said, "That's not appropriate." Senior Betty couldn't help but spread her hands and said as if it was natural, "But I'm not your opponent. You know that I'm not good at duels." Dake was silent for a moment and said, "Then let's wait for 5 minutes and default to a draw." "Isn't that a waste of your time?" Senior Betty said with a smile, "How about this, I have another suggestion." Dake, "What suggestion?" Senior Betty said with a smile, "I'm a witch." Dake said, "Is that so? Most of the people with divination talent are witches." Senior Betty nodded and said, "More or less. In short, I can get 5% of your credits by guessing your identity. Although I'm a 5th year, the credits I'll get tonight won't be as much as yours. You take 10% of the credits from me, and I'll take 5% of the credits from you. Let's make a bet and see who benefits more. How about it?" Dake pondered for a moment and said with a smile, "Okay. This does have a different kind of excitement, doesn't it?" Therefore, Senior Betty asked her companions to move away and stood there to take the attack of the demon beast. The demon beast didn't have any desire to attack, and it took 2 consecutive punches to increase its energy to 2,000 points. Dark won the duel without shedding a drop of blood and obtained 10% of the credits from senior sister Betty's lifesteal. But when he wanted to confirm the number of credits, senior Betty gently pressed down on his school card. Betty said gently, "Wait, let's do it together later." "That's more fun, isn't it?" "Indeed." Dake stopped. If he could directly calculate the winner after confirming the number of credits, it would lose the fun. Betty raised her index finger and waved it at him to attract his attention. "Then, I'll activate my ability, divination." "Your identity is—" Dake was puzzled. "Aren't you going to wait for me to tell you?" Betty smiled and said, "You're a vampire, right? You don't have any werewolves among your magic spirits." Dake smiled. "Correct." As a result, Betty successfully took 5% of his credits from his school card. Both of them picked up their respective school cards, checked their credits, and calculated the increase and decrease. Based on a rough estimation, as long as Betty obtained more than half of Dark's credits tonight, Dark would be able to win this bet. On the other hand, Betty would gain an advantage. Although Betty was a top student in the 5th grade, her excellence was mainly in theory. She might not be able to obtain more than half of Dake's credits. After a quick calculation, both sides smiled at each other and reported a string of numbers. But in fact, there was no need to report it. From the increase and decrease of credits, it could be seen who won and who lost. "Looks like I've won." Betty revealed a slightly smug smile. She had a little more credits than before the duel. Dake put away his school card and said regretfully, "It's all my fault for working too hard." Betty chuckled at his sudden words. She stretched out her hand and said, "Since I've won, then as the victor, I invite you to dance tonight. You won't refuse, right?" Although Dake was a little surprised, he still shook her hand and said, "Of course not." Senior Betty said happily, "Then goodbye for now. I won't waste your time." "Goodbye, Senior." Dake sighed in his heart. He regretted not wearing a mask when he went out. But he quickly perked up and continued to work hard. 3 minutes later, he caught another senior who was about a 4th grade and challenged him to a duel on the spot. Relying on the demon beast that had yet to degenerate from its evolved state, Dake successfully attracted his attention and used the demon beast's instant teleportation to win this duel. That 4th grade senior was obviously as hardworking as he was and had a lot of credits sucked away by him. Dake immediately swept away the haze and continued to hunt. He moved quickly on the 6th floor, firing one shot after another. Every time the cooldown ended, he would use lifesteal once, almost without pause. There weren't many opportunities like this where he could initiate a duel without a reason. Of course, he cherished it. But he also chose his opponent well. Basically, he evaluated the opponent's specific strength based on the opponent's magic guide sprite before initiating the duel. From 10:30 to 11:30, it was a whole hour. Dake paid the price of greed +1. During this time, Ghost and Witch accidentally guessed his identity and almost lost the duel. There were expenses and income. Finally, after an hour, he stopped. The increase in credits was secondary. Enjoying the fun of the duel was the most important. After an hour of continuous high-intensity duels, Dake was finally satisfied. He found the wall clock to confirm the time and prepared to leave the 6th floor of the castle where the atmosphere was feverish. 11:30, half an hour before the end of the masquerade party. Dake decided to continue going up. When he entered the 7th floor again, Dake saw that the seniors were all running in the same direction. He immediately realized that someone had found the boss of the 7th floor of the castle. Dake still remembered the 8-star boss vampire count that he encountered last year. He wanted to follow behind the seniors to check it out. However, after running 2 steps, he slowed down his pace. The boss of the 7th floor should be a 7-star leader tier monster, right? Although this 7-star leader tier monster is very likely to be stronger than an 8-star elite tier monster, it shouldn't be able to stop the seniors. If that's the case, even if I go, I can only watch them attack the boss. Too boring. At this thought, Dake stopped completely. Then, he quickly turned around and continued going up. Last year, I saw the boss of the 8th floor. This year, I'll target the final boss of the 9th floor, Bichimos. I remember that last year, Bichimos was summoned and killed by Senior Panduola. I wonder who will get it this year. Every year, after killing Bichimos, I'll get a small piece of Bichimos' horn. I hope that by this time next year, I'll also have the strength to fight for it. Dake made a goal in his heart and quickened his pace. Not long after, he arrived at the 8th floor of the castle. At this time, the number of juniors who were brave enough to go up to the higher floors was gradually increasing. Apart from the 8th and 9th floors, the upper floors had basically been cleared of monsters. As long as the juniors brought enough candy, they basically didn't have to worry about being attacked by monsters. What they needed to worry about were the other students in the carnival. The werewolf and vampire were still hunting for their prey. Spectre and witch were scheming for an opportunity. Phoenix was looking for an opportunity to be reborn. Titan was trying his best to maintain order. And Bichimos was looking for the boss. When the boss of the 7th floor was summoned, the bosses of the other floors were also successfully summoned. The masquerade party entered its most fervent moment. At this time, Dake chose to enter the 8th floor of the castle, which was still filled with danger. Then, he was immediately targeted by an 8-star common monster. Faced with 300 credits rushing towards him, Dake couldn't hold back for a moment. He used Bliss 3 and Fusion to summon the Basti Beast. The Basti Beast held the single scabbard and chopped the 8-star common monster to death on the spot. Then, he looked at the summoned Basti Beast and decided to stay on the 8th floor for a while. 15 minutes was enough for the Basti Beast to find and kill 10 common 8-star monsters. That was a whole 3,000 credits. And in a moment of greed, Dake welcomed the last 15 minutes of the masquerade party on the 8th floor. He lightly counted the credits in his hands and couldn't help but feel regretful. There weren't that many monsters on the 8th floor. He only found 9 more. Together with the one at the beginning, he barely managed to gather 10 monsters. "Wake me up a little more," after whispering in his ear, the Basti Beast gave him a final hug. Then, it dispelled Fusion amidst the light. The little devil beast and the Diru beast, who had separated, glared at each other. The Diru beast instantly leaped away, and the little devil beast took the opportunity to jump into Dark's arms and made a face at the Diru beast. The Diru beast coldly snorted and looked away. "Okay, stop messing around." Dake used Energy Potion to replenish the mana of the 2 magic guide fairies and then said, "Next, let's go to the 9th floor and try to avoid fighting." The magic guide fairies nodded and each took a bunch of candy from his hand. Dake had never been to the 9th floor of the castle on the eve of Halloween. Most of his understanding of the 9th floor was obtained from his conversation with Panduola Sr. The 8th floor and the 9th floor were actually very similar. Only the top students or senior students were qualified to go to the 9th floor. The difficulty of this year's high level was higher than last year's. Even the top students would find it difficult to deal with the 9-star monsters on the 9th floor. After a little calculation of efficiency and consumption, one would find that the 9th floor wasn't a good choice. Therefore, theoretically speaking, there should be a large number of monsters left on the 9th floor. Entering the 9th floor under such circumstances, even if one brought a large amount of candy, it wouldn't be safe. The 9-star monsters had a large number of methods to prevent people from scattering the candy. But in the 9th floor, there was something that attracted the attention of the senior students. First, it was the resource points. The resource points on the 9th floor would definitely provide more credits and better resources. Although the difficulty of conquering it alone might be very high, if one succeeded, it would be a huge profit. Just this point alone was enough to attract the top students to take the risk. And the second attraction was the Bichimos horn. The Bichimos was the king of the beasts. In legends, it was a land monster that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Leviathan. Together with the Leviathan, they ruled over the land and the sea respectively. As the final boss of the masquerade ball, although the Bichimos, refined by the professors, wasn't as good as the legendary Bichimos, the Bichimos horn, used to refine it was the genuine Bichimo's horn. Every year on Halloween, the Shangmalian Academy would use a part of the Bichimo's horn as the final reward. This was because the Academy possessed the one and only Bichimo's horn in the world. That huge horn was still alive, even after being separated from the body of the Bichimos. Every year, the Academy would cut off a little bit of the Bichimo's horn. Like flesh and blood, it would slowly heal and eventually recover to its original state. Even though the Bichimo's horn had become very weak after being worn down for so many years. But even with just a small part of the Bichimo's horn, it was still possible to refine a fourth-step magical fairy. Fourth step, surpassing 9 stars. Without a doubt, this was the best trump card a student could obtain. Therefore, even if they had to stake it all, those top students among the senior students would still try their best to conquer the Bichimos. Under normal circumstances, they would even form a team to increase the success rate. Panduola being able to summon the Bichimos in the last 3 minutes of last year's event was actually largely due to luck. Of course, her ability to kill the Bichimos within 3 minutes was real. Dake stepped onto the 9th floor. Then, the Dirk beast walking beside him reacted quickly and immediately threw out a handful of candies. The 2 monsters that had half of their heads popped out from the shadows in the corner immediately lost their desire to attack. "Let's go," the Dirk beast immediately said in a low voice. Then, it took the lead and led Dake away from the entrance of the corridor. In the records of previous years, the Bichimos was summoned in the last 15 minutes or more. Therefore, Dake wasn't in a hurry. He also didn't have any plans to fight for the final boss this year. His purpose in coming to the 9th floor was only to observe and make preparations for next year. Merely 3 minutes after he entered the 9th floor, a violent tremor suddenly appeared somewhere on the 9th floor. The final boss had been summoned. 48/127. Good morning. Although this month's update mission has been completed long ago, I still wrote 15,000 words today. It's the last day of October. For the sake of this lousy author who painstakingly writes for 32 hours every day, day and night. Do a good deed and vote. Chapter 639. Roar. Bichimo's roar tore through the night sky in an instant. The students who were immersed in their revelry were startled by this roar. They all raised their heads and looked towards the top of the castle. Other than the first-year newbies, almost all the students realized at the first moment that the final boss had been summoned. Anna, who was strolling around the 6th floor with Luo C, immediately said excitedly, "Let's go and take a look too." Luo C touched his bag full of candies and nodded hesitantly. "Don't worry," Anna said cheerfully. "Isn't there only about 10 minutes left before the event ends? It should be enough." "All right then," Luo C said. "Think about it carefully. We won't be in too much danger if we follow behind the seniors." "That's right," Anna said happily. "Let's go. Perhaps we can see the final hunt." The students who had similar thoughts all walked towards the 9th floor of the castle, gradually forming a tide. Although the ghosts on the 9th floor were terrifying, the ghosts wandering around the castle all had a core setting of trick or treat. Remember the URL. Vipkanshu. 6. In other words, don't trick or treat if you give candy. The candies accumulated over the course of the night were the tickets for the students to watch the final boss battle. The top students who were originally on the 9th floor naturally ran towards the direction where Bichimos appeared at an even faster speed. According to the rules of the event over the years, as long as the group of students who summoned Bichimos failed in their crusade, the others could snatch it. At that time, the final boss would become an ownerless object. The huge amount of credits obtained after killing it would be divided equally according to the damage dealt. The gift box that would be dropped would belong to the person who dealt the most damage. In addition, the person who dealt the final blow to the final boss would receive double the amount of damage dealt. The students who came to fight for the final boss were all familiar with these rules. They also used candies to avoid the battle and soon arrived at the southwest corner of the castle. The 3-man team that summoned Bichimos was engaged in a fierce battle with it. The speed at which Dark arrived here was slightly slower than the top students. However, thanks to this, his journey was quite smooth. When he arrived at his destination, the ceiling of the 9th floor of the castle had already been lifted. Looking up from here, he could even see the spiral clock tower. The hands of the minutes and seconds continued to move forward at a completely constant speed. There were only 10 minutes left before the event ended. He stopped in a corner and released the Dream Demon to guard the surroundings. Then, he carefully observed the battle. The huge enchantment outside the castle blocked out the moonlight. The pitch-black rune dragon hovered close to the enchantment, and black smoke drifted around like clouds. The final boss, named Bichimos, stood proudly like a majestic mountain. This was the first time Dake had seen this giant beast with his own eyes. He immediately observed it carefully and compared it with what he had read in the books. Although it was slightly different from what was described in the books, there was no doubt that Bichimos was powerful. According to some legends, Bichimos was the largest creature on land, capable of devouring 1,000 mountain peaks every day. Although the size of this Bichimos wasn't that terrifying, it could still be considered a giant beast. Its tail was as straight as cedar wood, its muscles were as solid as stone, and its bones were as hard as steel. The magical fairy summoned by the three-man team at the beginning had surrounded and attacked it wildly, but it couldn't even penetrate its skin. Its huge body had tenacity that surpassed common sense. The terrifying curved horns on both sides of its head could pierce through any defense. The huge claws on its 4 limbs could tear through any obstacle. Its angry roar could even create hurricanes. Dake couldn't help but feel shocked. At the same time, he quickly observed the 3 students surrounding Bichimos. It's the 5th year, 6th year Dragon Slayer of the Academy of Fools, Luke Beige. Luke Beige had a robust physique, but he wore thin clothes in the autumn night. Whether it was his physique or temperament, he was more like a student of the Academy of Knights. However, he did belong to the Academy of Fools. The other 2 people beside him should also be students of the Academy of Fools. One of the students wore a tight-fitting leather jacket with a leather whip at the back of his waist. He wore a half-purple butterfly mask on his face, looking like he was playing the role of some kind of queen. The other student wore a monkey jacket. The monkey tail behind his but was attached using some unknown method, allowing him to move nimbly. This woman and man were Luke Beige's regular team members. He's a Dragon Slayer, after all. He shouldn't be defeated in the crusade against Bichimos, right? Dake thought rather relaxedly as he continued to observe the battlefield. Luke Beige's main force was a 9-star magical fairy, Mountain Giant. However, this mountain giant had almost never appeared on the dueling stage. Even during the dueling festival at Easter, Dake had never seen him summon it. Therefore, it was highly likely that he had recently refined it. Although the mountain giant was called a giant, it wasn't a demi-human, but an elemental. It was an amalgamation of rock-type energy, with rocks as hard as steel piled up all over its body. Although it wasn't as big as Bichimos, when it stood up, it was almost as tall as Bichimos when it landed on all 4s. It was by relying on this defensive mountain giant that Luke Beige was able to block the violent attacks of Bichimos. It was most likely related to why he had the idea of leading a team to fight the final boss. Above his head, a huge, dragon-slaying sword was floating. That was his signature move, the cursed sword that had a powerful restraining effect against dragon types. It was of the same type as the Holy Sword Curse. Therefore, he could treat it as a cursed sword during a duel, and he could control it himself. Although Bichimos wasn't a pure dragon type, it possessed a portion of dragon type attributes. It had dragon scales on its back, giving it an extremely strong defense. If he used the dragon slaying sword, he could shatter its dragon scales. This combination of attack and defense was the main method Luke Beige used to fight against Bichimos. As for his 2 companions, they were relatively weaker. Their main magic guide fairies were only 8 stars. However, they used a large number of strengthening methods to greatly increase the strength of their magical fairy, allowing them to confront Bichimos without falling into a disadvantageous position for the time being. In theory, Bichimos was only a 9-star single-use magical fairy. There wasn't a difference in hypostasis between the two sides. Most people would think so, right? A familiar and pleasant voice suddenly came from behind. Dake was wondering why Dream Demon didn't give him a warning when he saw the Panduola Senior walking out from behind him. She was holding Dream Demon with one hand and rubbing her face against Dake's. Dake couldn't help but roll his eyes. He then asked, "Senior, what do you think?" The Panduola Senior said in an experienced tone, "Last year, I went on a crusade against Bichimos and did a detailed investigation and research on Bichimo's horn. Later on, I discovered that Bichimos should be a type of illusionary god type, possessing the characteristic of hypostasis plus one. Hypostasis plus one? Dake's heart skipped a beat as he thought of the moon goddess. He said, then in terms of hypostasis, it should belong to the fourth tier? When the hypostasis difference was too great, and it was an illusionary god type, even dream demons, same fate, might not be useful. Unfortunately, after the previous battle, most of the Great Sin cards were still on cooldown and couldn't be tested. It's like this. The Panduola Senior nodded. The hypostasis difference will cause some sure-kill skills to be ineffective against it, or their effects will be weakened. Moreover, after its 3 attributes were specially strengthened, each of them surpassing 9-star perfection, it's extremely difficult to kill it. Dake smiled and said, "But Senior, haven't you killed it by yourself before?" Panduola raised her head slightly and smiled. "Of course, that's because I'm stronger than it." Dake watched as the battle reached its climax and asked, "Then in Senior's opinion, can Senior Luke Beige succeed?" "Unfortunately," Panduola shook her head decisively. "That's why we have to start preparing now. When the mountain giant's defense is shattered, Luke Beige will be defeated." Dake asked doubtfully, "Us?" Panduola nodded and said, "Yes, us." A large number of students flew out of the castle's windows and landed on the top of the castle. They tried their best to stand at the edge of the roof, far away from the center of the battlefield. The pressure emanating from Bichimos made it hard for the weaker students to breathe. This made them realize that if they got too close, they might not be able to withstand the aftershocks of the battle. Deanna, Luo C, Ai Ma, Sarah, Dolong, White, Luo Boat, Justin. Many second-year students also mixed in. They watched from afar, their faces full of shock. Whether it was the final boss, Bichimos, or the mountain giant that blocked Bichimos' violent attacks, both made them feel awe and veneration. At this time, the professors also silently appeared on the roof or in the air. The final boss, Bichimos, was set to appear at the end of the battle because it was too powerful. If they were not careful, they could hurt the students. Therefore, every year at this time, professors would be arranged to protect the students. But this year, even more professors were only watching from a different location after they got addicted to watching the battle. Professor Lily sat in front of Professor Midia's carriage, her 2 little legs propped up as she watched the battle below, her eyes darting back and forth. Suddenly, her eyes lit up as she noticed little Dake standing side by side with Panduola Doragon. "Little Lily, who do you think will take down Bichimos this time?" Professor Midia, who was sitting on the other side, asked in a seemingly casual manner. "I don't know, but it's not Dake," Lily said with a smile. Midia couldn't help but shake her head helplessly. With Dake Diming's current strength, it was indeed impossible for him to take down Bichimos, but it wasn't like he didn't have a chance to perform. If he was lucky, he might even be able to obtain a scale or half a piece. As she thought of this, she lowered her head and looked down with a smile. On the spiral clock tower, the children who stayed behind to guard the castle, Agu, Ubutero, and Cub Bear were all lying on the edge of the fence, watching excitedly. After being bored for an entire night, they finally felt a little bit like participating in a masquerade ball. When the final boss hunt was over, Xiong Bao could even sneak into the banquet hall on the first floor of the castle and pretend to be Dake's magical elf to attend the ball. Under the gazes of so many people, the situation on the battlefield suddenly changed. After Bichimos was once again blocked by Mountain Giant, it suddenly stood up on its hind legs. When it was lying on the ground, it was already more than 10 meters tall. Now that it suddenly stood up like a human, it was even more terrifying. Those students of lower grades couldn't help but gasp and retreat. Luke Beige and the other two also had solemn gazes as they suddenly shouted. All kinds of magical radiance shot madly at Bichimos. The night sky that had turned dark due to the barrier was suddenly illuminated by these countless magical radiances. However, the dragon scales on Bichimo's back suddenly grew, covering its entire body at an extremely fast speed, including its softest abdomen. The newly grown dragon scales emitted a cold, pitch-black light, reflecting back most of the magical radiance. Bichimos raised its head and roared. A scarlet, dark, and scorching radiance erupted from its raised right claw. Then, as its body pounced forward, it viciously slapped down with its right claw. With an explosion that was louder than thunder, the mountain giant, that had been struggling for a few minutes, was smashed into pieces. Countless huge rocks were sent flying in all directions as a result. The students who were watching the battle from a closer distance immediately took action, blocking or obliterating the huge rocks. Large beads of sweat dripped down from Luke Beige's forehead. For a period of time, he was known as the pride of the House of Fools. However, after that momentary outburst, he was unable to maintain his rapid progress like his rival, Evernight Baron Noah Sharp. In the first semester of the 5th grade, he had gradually been unable to keep up with Evernight Baron Noah Sharp's footsteps. Therefore, he placed his final hope on Bichimo's horn, hoping that after obtaining Bichimo's horn, he would be able to refine a 4th-tier magic-conducting sprite. Then, in the school championship competition of the 6th years, he would be able to make a complete turnaround. Although this was only a temporary solution and not a permanent solution, it was already the fastest way he could think of to improve his strength. However, tonight, with the support of his two companions, he finally cracked the mechanism and summoned the final boss, Bichimos. However, after that, he discovered that this Bichimos was much more powerful than he had expected. Last year, he had clearly observed it from a close distance. Last year, Bichimos was killed by the 4th-year Pan Duola Doragon within 3 minutes. As expected, I can't feel it if I don't personally participate in the battle. It wasn't until this year, when he stood in front of Bichimos, that the feeling of powerlessness slowly emerged. Luke Beige clenched his teeth and raised his hands towards the sky, as if he was holding the hilt of a sword. He tightly grabbed the dragon-slaying sword in the air. Ah! As if he wanted to pour out all the strength in his body, Luke Beige let out a frantic cry. Then, he poured all his magic power into the dragon-slaying sword, and controlled it to hack down heavily. Bang! Bichimo's huge curved horn was smashed open by this sword strike, leaving a huge hole in it. Black smoke surged out from this gap. Roar! Bichimos let out an extremely furious roar because of this strike. Ha ha ha! Looking at the unprecedentedly furious Bichimos, Luke Beige let out a brisk laugh. As for his two companions, after calmly confirming that the crusade had failed, they suddenly pulled him back. It's here! The upperclassmen who had been prepared for a long time all let out the same sound in their hearts. Their faces were filled with joy. At that moment, the needle on the spiral clock tower had just turned to 11:55. There was still a full 5 minutes left. There was simply too much time. Luke Beige's team of 3 didn't stubbornly refuse to retreat. They were a great help. It's time for us to take over. Evernight Baron Noah Sharp took off the mask on his face and threw it out. When the mask was blown back by the wind, the sacrificial summoning that he had long prepared was activated on the spot. Several white lights flew into the sacrificial summoning array. The crimson spine black dragon rushed out of the summoning array with a furious roar. Noah Sharp flung the corner of his clothes. The magic card in his hand shone faintly. His body disappeared into thin air and suddenly appeared on the back of the crimson spine black dragon. Although the crimson spine black dragon was still not as big as Bichimo's, in terms of size, its terrifying draconic aura, which carried a dense aura of darkness, made its aura unstoppable. Almost at the same time, dozens of different summoning arrays lit up around them. The upperclassmen were either summoning their main forces, activating their secret instruments, or casting various strengthening spells. A radiance that was brighter than the previous volley of magical light illuminated the entire roof of the castle. The fluctuation of magic power rose rapidly and spread in all directions. Awoo! Another roar that carried a terrifying draconic aura rushed into the sky. On the other side of Bichimos, a pure white dragon with a body as slender as a snake flew out from the special summoning array at high speed. With a light leap, the Panduola landed on the dragon's neck. The celestial white dragon was nearly 20 meters long. Its snow-white scales looked delicate and soft, but in fact, they were incomparably tough. Its jade-like antlers emitted a gentle white light. Its gentle and beautiful body was intoxicating. However, it was this white dragon that killed Bichimos from last year within 3 minutes. The students who surged forward were immediately alerted when they saw the white dragon. They shouted loudly and gave it their all. Everyone knew that if they did not give it their all, the Silver Dragon Lady alone would be able to kill Bichimos on the spot. Needless to say, the Crimson Spine Black Dragon of the Evernight Baron had also appeared. If they did not give it their all, they might not even get to drink the soup. When everyone's gazes were drawn away by the celestial white dragon that soared into the sky. However, they did not notice that below the 9th floor, a white dragon with green eyes that was as pure as the celestial white dragon's aura of light had also soared into the sky. On the back of this white dragon, whose scales were covered with green veins, was a slender silver-white humanoid magic elf, Moon God. It was riding on the back of the white dragon. Dake originally did not intend to participate in this battle for the final boss. However, Senior Panduola wanted him to ride the celestial white dragon and fight together with her. Of course, he would not let her succeed. If he really agreed to the so-called fight together, he would only be in a supporting position. There would then be a difference in status between the two of them. Dake naturally would not let this happen. Therefore, he decided to join the battle. He also made a bet with Senior Panduola while he was at it. They were competing to see who could inflict the most damage on Bichimos. Although Dake did not believe that he could suppress Senior Panduola, sometimes losing a bet and owing a debt was also a strategy. However, when he boasted, he was also prepared to give it his all. With Halloween approaching, the fanatical atmosphere of so many people besieging a gigantic beast could not help but be immersed in it. Go, Cyanide White Dragon! Destructive jet of white light. When Cyanide White Dragon flew into the sky, Dake suddenly pointed his finger at Bichimos, which was emitting an even more ferocious aura. Faced with the encirclement of so many people, the terrifying gigantic beast once again stood on 2 legs. Its huge claws shrouded in scarlet radiance seemed to tear space apart as it fiercely swung out, leaving bloody afterimages in the air. The magical fairies who were unable to dodge in time were slapped by the huge claws, dying on the spot. Even 8-star magical fairies were unable to resist this terrifying huge claw. The wind radiating from the claws caused the surrounding magical fairies to scatter in panic. Having adopted the correct strategy, Dake Dimeng did not approach. Instead, he ordered Cyanide White Dragon to continuously jet out destructive white light. A mere 7-star Cyanide White Dragon might not be able to cause too much damage to Bichimos. However, dripping water could penetrate stone. No matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. Bichimos possessed the ability to rapidly regenerate. If the damage dealt to it could not keep up with the speed of its regeneration, it would never be able to be killed. After Dake ordered Cyanide White Dragon to continue attacking, he immediately drew upon the moonlight and summoned Lunar Eclipse. 12 lunar eclipse beams, their power multiplied under the moonlight, blasted towards Bichimos' head amidst a large number of attacks. On the other hand, the 2 9-star dragon species in the field charged towards Bichimos without the slightest bit of fear. The redback black dragon's eyes were scarlet red. Its sharp claws shone with a scarlet radiance, just like Bichimos' huge claws. Its claws actually tore apart Bichimos' tough dragon scales and left bloody wounds on its body. As a matter of fact, Noah Sharp had added some powder from Bichimos' horn into his redback black dragon when he was refining it. Under the convergence of many factors, this redback black dragon was born. On the other hand, Panduola Doragon's sky white dragon suddenly opened its mouth and shot out a rapidly converging white light. The white light accurately hit Bichimo's hind leg, almost piercing through it. The terrifying power left the spectators speechless. Compared to that, Cyan Eye's white dragon's destructive white light paled in comparison. They were completely incomparable. However, the difference in star class led to the difference in the power of the Sure Kill skill. After summoning Lunar Eclipse, Dake pressed the Moon God Stone on his chest. Under the cover of the blazing white light, no student saw this scene. Even those who did not know Dake well thought that the Moon God, riding on the back of Cyan Eye's white dragon, was his magical fairy. The corner of his mouth curled up, revealing an excited smile. It was not bad that Night God Tiger chose to make its debut at this moment. 3 seconds later, the Moon God Stone appeared in his hand. He slowly pressed the stone into the heart protection mirror on his chest. Then, a dazzling silver light erupted from the heart protection mirror, gradually engulfing his evolved body. After he became a luminous body, his body was rapidly changing under the light of evolution. The moment power erupted from the body, it was always so intoxicating. He stood up from the back of Cyan Eye's white dragon. The silver-white armor that originated from the Moon God armor separated from his body one by one and floated around him. The armor on his head suddenly turned into the appearance of a tiger under the dazzling white light, and the armor on his limbs also grew sharp tiger claws. On his body, the layers of armor became thicker. A long silver-white metal tail suddenly elongated and floated in the air. He suddenly opened his arms, and all the armor stuck close to him. Roar! It was as if a roar was born from the bottom of his heart. Dake suddenly jumped off the dragon's back, relying on the Moon God armor's floating ability to run in the void. The terrifying power that seemed to want to engulf him almost burst out from his body. He evolved from Moon God to a Night God Tiger. Although a Night God Tiger was still only a 7-star, the Sure Kill skill, God Personality Armament, increased its magic power, attack, and defense by 1,000 points. It was not lower than a 9-star magic elf. As for the necessary hypostasis +1, it also possessed the hypostasis of the 4th tier. In other words, he was already standing on the same level as Bichimo's. He was fearless. Dake charged towards Bichimo's huge body. Amidst the continuous rumbling in his ears, he felt his blood boiling for the first time. The excitement and joy brought about by joining a battle of this level after his evolution was a different kind of feeling. Moon Tiger God's Descent. As Dake Diming's figure charged over, Dake used the Sure Kill skill Moon Tiger God's Descent for the first time. It was meaningless to analyze the power of this Sure Kill skill from the data level. Only when it was used in a head-on battle could its power be verified. Dake could clearly feel that the magic power of Night God Tiger decreased by more than 1/10 the moment it used the Sure Kill skill. And this 1/10 of its magic power transformed into Moon Tiger above its head. It was a silver-white divine beast that was very similar to his God Personality Armament, but it was not mechanized. Its size was only slightly inferior to Bichimo's. When this huge creature appeared, the students finally couldn't help but cast their gazes over. Almost everyone subconsciously treated it as a powerful magic elf that was not inferior to Reedridge Black Dragon and Sky White Dragon. Card name, Moon Tiger. Attribute, Dark. Magic power, 450. Attack, 10,000. Defense, 9,000. Sure Kill skill, Moon Tiger Roar, none. The magic power of Moon Tiger was only 1/10 of Night God Tigress. God Personality Armament's attribute bonus to a Night God Tiger was the same as Divine Holy Rings. It was a basic bonus from the inside out. And Moon Tiger's attack and defense were 2 times that of Night God Tiger's. This caused the Divine Beast's attack power to reach an extremely terrifying 10,000 points in terms of statistics. And its defense was also a full 9,000 points. Even an extraordinary 9-star magic elf would find it difficult to break through its defense, unless it used a Sure Kill skill that at least doubled its attack power. And such a Moon Tiger could be released at the same time when Night God Tiger released Moon Tiger Roar. When this divine beast was summoned, even Panduola, who was riding on Sky White Dragon, couldn't help but reveal a surprised expression. But immediately after, her expression turned serious. At this moment, she suddenly realized that when she made the bet with her junior, he wasn't bluffing. "If I'm not careful, I might lose?" She smiled, her smile bright and beautiful. It was even more beautiful than the moon. After summoning Moon Tiger, Dake released Moon Tiger Roar without hesitation. This was also the first time he tried to release this sure-kill skill. And Bichimos was the best test subject. Of course, it was best to save this kind of ultimate skill for last to maximize its effectiveness. But Moon Tiger's summoning could only last for 30 seconds. Even if it could be doubled under the moonlight, it would only last for 1 minute. And Bichimos, which could shatter an 8-star magic elf with one claw, could even break through Moon Tiger's defense. Therefore, releasing it immediately to stack the damage was actually the wisest choice. Dake didn't let Night God Tiger's bestial nature take away his thoughts. He followed the guidance of the sure-kill skill and opened his mouth abruptly. Moon Tiger, which was standing in the air, opened its bloody mouth at the same time. Then, from its mouth and Moon Tiger's mouth, tiger-shaped shock waves that were almost as big as their bodies were shot out at the same time. 2 shock waves, one small and one large, emitting a terrifying aura, hit Bichimos' side without any hindrance. Boom boom. 2 consecutive explosions rang out. The huge Bichimos was actually blown to the side. The scene was so shocking that even the upperclassmen who were surrounding Bichimos were almost stunned. Bichimos, who had collapsed with a loud bang, however, immediately got back to his feet despite being heavily injured. Then, it suddenly inhaled. Countless black streams of air surged in from all directions, converging into a vortex that resembled a black hole in its mouth. "Spread out!" Evernight Baron Noah Sharp's shout suddenly rang out. The upperclassmen who had long since understood the attack pattern of this final boss immediately controlled their magic elves to spread out in all directions, ready to dodge or defend at any time. But Bichimos slowly turned its head towards Night God Tiger and Moon Tiger that were floating in the air. Beast God Cannon? Dake's mind moved, and he suddenly pointed at the Moon God Mirror on his chest. Perfect, let's see how high the upper limit of Moon God Mirror is. Under the armor, Dake's face flushed red like blood. He had a strand of Blessing of the Wind Elf hidden in his ear. He also had a fairy puppet on him. This wasn't a foolhardy act. When Bichimos' Beast God Cannon finished charging, it suddenly shot out. Moon Tiger quickly dodged under his command. But he himself stood in the air, not moving at all. A layer of silver-white radiance circulated around his body, and the silver-white armor on his body instantly turned into a complete mirror. The next moment, the spiral-like pitch-black beam of light crossed the distance between them and hit Dake Dimeng in an instant. Professor Li, who was sitting on the pumpkin carriage, couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Several professors who were eager to attack instantly stopped their actions. Under countless gazes, Bichimos' Beast God Cannon completely engulfed Night God Tiger. But in the next moment, the silver-white moonlight erupted. After the Beast God Cannon dissipated, a Beast God Cannon that was much smaller than Bichimos' Beast God Cannon, but the size of Night God Tiger, was suddenly shot back. Bichimos probably didn't expect that its killing move would be reflected. It didn't dodge at all, and a bloody hole was pierced through its body. Then, Moon Tiger suddenly pounced on it, pressed its body down, and bit it. After being stunned for a moment, the surrounding students immediately shouted. Their magical fairy once again released all kinds of killing moves, shooting at Bichimos, with the momentum of wanting to engulf it. The Redback Black Dragon and Sky White Dragon also continued to attack without pause. Bichimos finally let out a painful howl. "It's time." Dake narrowed his eyes, estimating the time. The mirror-like armor on his body had dimmed, and the moonlight energy stored in the Moon God Mirror had been exhausted. Although Full Moon Mirror could last for 30 seconds, If the moonlight energy was released within 30 seconds, it would naturally lose its effect. The moonlight passed through the barrier and was attracted to a night god Taiga, slowly replenishing the depletion of the moon god mirror. After returning, he would have to let the moon god's soul bask in the moonlight more. Dake suddenly said in a low voice, "Cyan Eyes White Dragon, killing move, Cyan Eyes Incarnation." Roar, the Cyan Eyes White Dragon, whose radiance was completely overshadowed by the Redback Black Dragon and Sky White Dragon, let out an impassioned dragon roar at this moment. Its desire to battle was also aroused by the atmosphere before its eyes. It was even aroused by the Redback Black Dragon and the Sky White Dragon. The Cyan Eyes White Dragon suddenly spread its wings, and white light erupted from its chest and covered its entire body in the blink of an eye. The outline of its body suddenly swelled, and the green veins on its body faded away at a speed visible to the naked eye. A pure white dragon species with only green eyes was instantly revealed amidst the gathering of white light. Dake raised his right hand again, and then chopped down with all his might, shouting, "Destructive spray of white light!" An even larger and thicker beam of white light of destruction shot towards Bichimos, who had been knocked down by the moon tiger. After using Cyan Eyes Incarnation, the Cyan Eyes White Dragon could temporarily transform into a Cyan Eyes White Dragon, gaining all attributes apart from its killing move. However, it didn't have a killing move, but it still retained the Cyan Eyes White Dragon's killing move. Naturally, this destructive spray of white light could be shot out once every 3 seconds. It could be shot out 10 times in 30 seconds. However, after transforming into a 9-star Cyan Eyes White Dragon with great difficulty, it couldn't continue hiding behind and shooting out beams of light. For dragons, biting with their teeth, tearing with their claws, and whipping with their tails was the nature hidden deep within their hearts. Although pure-blooded dragons were highly intelligent lifeforms, their bestial nature wasn't weak at all. It was just that their arrogance and intelligence were suppressed deep within their hearts. Therefore, when pure-blooded dragons were transformed into demonic dragons by the demons, they would gain even greater strength due to the explosive nature of their nature. The Cyan Eyes White Dragon pounced towards Bichimos. While biting and tangling, it shot out white light at the closest distance. Dake himself also summoned Single Scabbard, and seized the opportunity to pounce. However, he was more agile and nimble, so he wouldn't really fight head-on. Time trickled by. The moon tiger that was engaged in close combat with Bichimos didn't even last until the 1-minute duration ended. After 30 seconds, its defense was broken through. Its mere 450 points of magic power was as fragile as a thin piece of paper. After Moon Tiger left the field, the most eye-catching creatures were the 3 9-star dragons. The dark type, Redback Black Dragon. The light type, Celestial White Dragon. And the light type, Cyan Eyes White Dragon. The 3 dragons danced wildly in the air, making this Halloween masquerade ball even more dazzling. However, the Cyan Eyes White Dragon only appeared for 30 seconds before it turned back into a Cyan Eyes White Dragon. Not long after, the Redback Black Dragon and Celestial White Dragon launched their attacks at the same time, completely ending the life of the final boss, Bichimos. Boom! When Bichimos' body exploded into magic power light spots and shot into the sky like fireworks, enthusiastic cheers rang out from the top of the castle. The clock chimed silently amidst the continuous cheers. Dong! Dake walked towards the corner of the 9th floor of the castle amidst the cheers. The silver armor on his body quickly disintegrated and he transformed back into a vampire. The Cyan Eyes White Dragon, which didn't have much magic power left, had also returned to the magic card. He slowed down his pace and the flush on his face slowly receded. When Bichimos' life was ended, he received a huge amount of credits that shocked him. He couldn't help but smile at this amount of credits. After Panduola received the gift box, she jumped off the dragon's back under Noah Sharp's murderous gaze. The Celestial White Dragon turned into a white light and followed her into the magic card. She walked to Dake's side with a gentle smile. Dake turned his face and said softly, "Senior, why aren't you wearing a bridal gown this year?" 51/127 October is finally over. Although I've encountered many terrible things this month, I still managed to write 200,000 words. Today is still the same. I beg for a guaranteed monthly ticket and a guaranteed blade. Happy Halloween. Chapter 640. Panduola circled around Dake and blinked. "Don't I look good tonight?" Dake replied very solemnly, "Yes, you do." Naturally, Panduola's clothes weren't the only thing that looked good. She was dressed rather casually tonight and didn't deliberately dress herself up. However, this ordinary outfit didn't seem ordinary on her. It was said that clothes made the man, and saddles made the horse. However, if a person was truly too beautiful, they would naturally be able to turn their plain clothes into gold. But tonight, whether it was her taste in clothes or her demeanor, she was more girlish than usual. Although it wasn't appropriate for a 16-year-old girl, the feeling she gave others was that of a younger person. "Is it because I have a family now?" Dake thought. Then, the two of them compared the credits they earned. Although Dake performed outstandingly in the crusade against Bichimos, he still couldn't compare to Panduola. Remember, https://m. Vipkanchu. VIP. He had already foreseen the outcome from the beginning. He didn't feel too disappointed and only nodded slightly. "It seems that I've lost." Panduola smiled. "Then, does the loser have to pay a price?" Dake replied calmly, "I'm willing to accept my loss." Panduola leaned over and whispered in his ear, "I want to make a deal with you." Dake asked curiously, "What kind of deal?" Senior Panduola didn't directly use the bet to obtain material goods. Instead, she only wanted to obtain the right to make a deal. From this, it could be seen that she had big plans. However, Dake felt that he didn't have enough resources to make her so cautious. Except for those two sacred swords? Could it be that Senior Panduola had taken a fancy to those two sacred swords? Dake couldn't help but reveal some doubts in his eyes. However, Panduola didn't seem to want to say it out loud. "Let's talk about it in detail after the ball. Until then, can I collect some interest?" Dake naturally understood what she meant, but unfortunately, luck was not on his side tonight, so he said directly, "Although I would like to invite you to dance with me, unfortunately, I already have an appointment with someone else." "Who is it?" Panduola did not deny his intentions. However, the name that Doc said next made her feel a little surprised. She originally thought that it would be D. Anna or Luo C. When the cheers from the top of the castle gradually subsided, the students excitedly went downstairs to the banquet hall. The roof that had been opened by the appearance of the final boss also closed after everyone left. Seniors and juniors, boys and girls, students and professors, humans and magical elves. Not long after, everyone entered the banquet hall on the first floor. In the hall with 4 long tables, cute white ghosts and burning pumpkin lanterns floated in the air, illuminating the entire banquet hall. Walking into the hall, one could see a dazzling array of Halloween decorations everywhere. Even the tablecloths on the long tables were full of Halloween-style decorations. On the tablecloths, there were all kinds of unique delicacies. Apples smeared with honey exuded a tempting sweetness. Pumpkins with ghost faces carved on them were filled with purple sweet potato and pumpkin porridge. Of course, the meat that was essential for the banquet was also available. Dake Dimming and Panduola Doragon entered side by side, then waved to each other and went to their respective long tables. D. Anna and Luo C. had specially reserved a seat for him in the seats of the second year of the Aristocrat Academy. He walked to the middle of the two girls and sat down. Because he was used to it, he didn't feel anything special. Just as he sat down, D. Anna came over with bright eyes and whispered in his ear, Dake, are you the one wearing the armor?" Dake took a goblet from the table and said, "That's me." He had never worn the armor in public before, but there was no need to deliberately hide it. "It's really you," D. Anna said enviously. "If only I could have this type of armor." Dake encouraged her, "You can definitely do it." Yes. D. Anna nodded vigorously, "Good luck, good luck, good luck." Luo C said at the same time, let's eat something first, I'm about to faint from hunger. She stood up slightly, picked up a spoon and asked, do you want porridge? After Anna and Dake nodded in agreement, she scooped a bowl of pumpkin porridge for them and then a bowl for herself. Although they had received a lot of candy, biscuits, and cakes from the masquerade, they still couldn't fill their stomachs. The food on the table still attracted their attention. Dake picked up the spoon and ate a spoonful. Feeling the hot pumpkin porridge flowing down his throat, he couldn't help but exclaim, I'm alive. After evolving the armor into the night god tiger, his stamina was depleted very quickly. Luo-si saw him eat some porridge and said with a smile, do you know who's number 1 among the second graders this year? Dake was startled and asked curiously, who's number 1? Luo-si winked at Anna and snickered, I told you he didn't see the rankings. Anna pouted and said dryly, okay, you first. Luo-si couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh, I'm kidding, you first. Dake couldn't help but ask, what are you talking about? Luo-si said, we're assigning your ownership rights, so Dake, you didn't agree to the other girls' dance invitations, right? Oh, Dake said, I didn't agree. Ha. Anna's eyes widened. Dake said helplessly, but I lost the bet. He lost the bet twice. Anna couldn't help but ask, who? Dake said, Betty from the 5th graders' school of magic. Luo-si was puzzled. Isn't that Pan Duola Sr.? I saw you guys come in together. Dake couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. I lost twice. Anna heard this and looked at Luo-si. Then she suddenly said with a smile, then there's nothing we can do. But this year's ball shouldn't be like last year's, right? I don't think so. Doc guessed. Compared to last year, the professors were obviously more vigilant this year. The fairies flying around the castle were proof of that. Plus, the secret passage hadn't been opened yet. Under such circumstances, it was unlikely that an accident would happen. But speaking of the secret passage, this year's number 1 student should be able to get a keycard, right? After all, if the secret passage was used properly, it would still be very valuable. Moreover, the secret passage was also a natural place for ceremonies, very suitable for refining the secret instrument card. As long as the number of students entering the secret passage was controlled, there shouldn't be any big problems. Well, so who's the number 1 student in the 2nd grade? Who's going to get the platinum star this year? Dake couldn't help but take out his school card and activate it to check. The first thing that appeared on the card was the overall ranking of his grade. The number 1 name was impressively Dake Dimming. Sure enough, number 1. Dake said in a low voice. After participating in the killing of Bichimos, he received a huge amount of credits, which made his credits in this event jump by 3 levels, reaching nearly 50,000 credits. At that time, he felt that the number 1 student in the grade should be easily in his hands. But as he continued to look, there were also many AI Ma in 2nd place. Anna immediately explained, AI Ma is Bichimos. She summoned the boss of the 3rd floor and killed it. Is that so? Then her luck is really good. Dake couldn't help but say, but after she killed the boss, no one tried to snatch it? Anna shook her head. It seems like someone wanted to, but the girls of the Night Academy were protecting her. They said that they wanted the Night Academy to get the Golden Star. Dake said in realization, I see. But even if he didn't participate in the killing of Bichimos, AI Ma's credits didn't surpass his. She could only be said to be number 1 after him. What a pity, he said. What a pity, what a pity. Anna repeated a few words, and then happily ate. If nothing unexpected happened tonight, Dake should also stay in the banquet hall until the end of the dance. The first time, the second time, I'll leave it to Betty and Panduola. After that, she and Luo-si will have Dake's everything. Anna, that's how generous you are. When all the professors were seated, Principal Cynthia St. Urti walked out from behind the stage. Every year at this time, she would announce the champion of each grade of the masquerade ball, give out the trophy, and officially announce the start of the final carnival of the masquerade ball. For this year's Halloween ball, she still appeared on the stage. Although, it was very likely that it wasn't her real body. Dake narrowed his eyes and tried to distinguish between the two, but in the end, he chose to focus on eating his porridge because he really couldn't tell the difference between the real and the fake. And a clone that no one could distinguish between the real and the fake was no different from the real body. Principal Aerti soon began her speech. After the speech ended, she paused, raised her wand and said, "Now, let's enter the final award ceremony. First, the first grades, Crimson Star. As freshmen, your activity in this masquerade ball is obvious to all, and there are many outstanding performances, but we all know that there can only be one champion. Let's welcome the champion of the first grade, Aurora Montefiore." When Principal Aerti called out Aurora's full name, the audience burst into warm applause. Although this name wasn't as eye-catching as the two princesses or dimming, there were many people who knew the surname of the mayor of the Freedom City. Almost all the second-grade students in the aristocratic academy knew that Miss Montefiore would enter Dake Diming's room every night. As for why she would enter a man's room late at night, of course, it was to deliver supper. However, since she had such a good relationship with Dake Diming, it was natural for her to receive guidance. Therefore, the second-grade students weren't surprised that Aurora was able to win the championship over the two princesses and the four, Dimming. On the other hand, the first-grade students found it difficult to accept this result. The difference in credits between the first-grade students wasn't very big. Whether it was the two princesses, the four, Dimming, the Orc royal family, or the Dark Elf girl, their credits were very close in the end. It was obviously not easy for Aurora to win first place among such a group of people. However, when Dake turned his head to look at the first-grade students, he found that the two princesses, who were still wearing their leather jackets, didn't seem depressed at all. They were even having fun. Well, being the champion doesn't count as a result. It's fine as long as they have fun. At least they have enough credits to repay their debts. Dake found the names of Victoria, Phoenix, Joey, and John in the first-grade rankings. Seeing that they had obtained a lot of credits, he was relieved. Then, he clapped as he watched Aurora stand up from her seat. Aurora was wearing a black dress, which formed a strong contrast with her silver-white hair. Her straight and slender legs were covered with delicate and soft white stockings, but she wore a pair of black leather shoes on her feet. The strong combination of black and white was not something an ordinary person could withstand. However, her skin was white enough, and her facial features were very delicate, which exuded a unique charm. It was a uniqueness that was completely different from her, who had always been low-key and reserved. When she walked onto the stage, the senior students finally matched Aurora Montifiore's name with her name. The slightly weakened applause just now became enthusiastic again. This was the first time Aurora Montefiore had entered the eyes of justice as a victor. Principal Aerti looked at Aurora with satisfaction. She thought that after the award ceremony, she should report the good news to Mayor Montefiore. She said in a very gentle tone, "Aurora, don't lower your head. You should be more confident." Aurora hurriedly raised her head, and a cute blush appeared on her tender and white face, which was like a freshly peeled egg. *Omega \***. It wasn't that she wasn't confident, she was just a little shy. Principal Aerti raised her magic wand and pointed. A huge pumpkin-colored egg appeared above Aurora's head out of thin air. Pa! The bottom of the egg suddenly cracked, and colorful ribbons and pieces of paper instantly shook off. Aurora resisted the urge to immediately dodge, and let the ribbons and pieces of paper fall on her body. Then she raised her hand and received a heavy trophy from Principal Aerti. The front of the trophy was engraved with the words, "Crimson Star," and the bottom of the trophy was written, "Incantation, Deserved." It was exactly the same as the trophy Dake received last year. Aurora lifted the trophy as though it was a light weight. Her heart was filled with joy. When she was in the Duke's mansion, she naturally appreciated Dake's trophy. Then, Principal Aerti asked two simple questions, and Aurora softly answered before leaving the stage. Then, Principal Aerti turned to look in Dake's direction and said loudly, "Next, let's welcome the champion of the second grade, the winner of the Golden Orange Star, Dake Dimming." "It's your turn," Deanna and Luo C whispered. Right away," Dake swallowed the bread in his mouth, stood up and walked towards the podium unhurriedly. However, even the first-grade students were not surprised by the fact that he received the Golden Orange Star title. The legend of Dake Dim Eng had been circulating in the academy for a long time. Moreover, he was the assistant professor of the first grade. In the words of the two little princesses, it would be surprising if he did not get first place. However, the second-grade students of the Knights Academy were gritting their teeth, and they were not too happy. They originally thought that the Knights Academy would have a chance this year. They did not expect that Dake Diming's credits would keep increasing, and the gap between him and AI Ma would only get bigger and bigger. What a pity! Even Luo Boat could not help but sigh. However, White, who was beside him, was not happy. He also received the identity of Bichimos, and was lucky enough to find clues about the boss on the 4th floor. However, in the end, he was unable to solve the riddle and summon the boss on the 4th floor. Otherwise, it wouldn't be like this now, where they even lost the second place that they got last year. After Dake Dim Eng walked onto the stage, he received the pumpkin-colored egg baptism. Then, he received the trophy and prepared to answer the question from Principal A. Erti. Principal A. Erti only said with a smile, "I hope that our second-grade students will be able to pose more of a threat to you in tomorrow's masquerade ball." Dake said calmly, "It's still possible." Principal A. Erti smiled and said, "Do you have any thoughts about being the consecutive champion of the first grade?" Dake shook his head and said, "I don't have any thoughts." Principal A. Erti said with a smile, "Then, congratulations again, you have won first place in this year's Halloween event." Dake slowly walked off the stage amidst the sudden applause. When he returned to his seat, he continued to eat. Then, Principal A. Erti continued to announce the awards. The champion of the 3rd grade was a student from the House of Fools who was not very famous. As expected, the champion of the 4th grade was won by Winnie Scatty from the School of Magic. The champion of the 5th grade was also won by Panduola Doragon from the School of Magic. And the champion of the 6th grade was won by Noah Sharp from the School of Knights. Counting carefully, out of the 6th grade champions, 2 each from the School of Nobles and the School of Magic, 1 from the School of Fools and 1 from the School of Knights, it was still acceptable. Then, it was finally time for the most popular award, the Platinum Star. The competition for the Platinum Star had always been very fierce. The student who won the Platinum Star would not only receive a huge amount of credits as a reward, but also a rare resource as a reward. Last year, Panduola Doragon had unfortunately lost to a 6th grade student. However, this year's 6th grade student was unable to block her path. Let us warmly congratulate the 5th grade student from the School of Magic, Panduola Doragon, for winning the Platinum Star. Principal A. Erti suddenly raised his magic wand, and bright fireworks bloomed on the stage. In the middle of the fireworks, the magic book emblem of the School of Magic appeared. At this time, Pandora Doragon stepped onto the stage and took the Platinum Star trophy from Principal Arte's hands. After receiving the trophy, she immediately turned to the professor's seats and raised the trophy high in front of Hephaestus. Clap, clap, clap. Hephaestus clapped with all her might, and the applause was thunderous. After Panduola stepped down from the stage, Principal A. Erti said loudly, "The award ceremony is over. Now that Halloween has arrived, allow me to congratulate you. Everyone, happy Halloween." Impassioned music suddenly began to play. The students who had eaten their fill stood up one after another. The students who had agreed to dance also walked to their dance partners. The ball to welcome Halloween had officially begun. In this atmosphere, Dake quickly finished the last mouthful of pumpkin porridge, wiped the corners of his mouth with a wet towel, and got up to walk to the stage. There were no outsiders in tonight's ball, so the students could dance and party to their heart's content without any scruples. Dake met Panduola Doragon at the edge of the stage. Panduola, who had been wearing ordinary clothes when she received the award, suddenly changed into a grand dress. She watched as Dake walked up to her and took the initiative to reach out her slender hand that was wearing a white lace glove. Dake hesitated for a moment. It wasn't until he saw Betty standing not far away and saw that she was just standing there and blinking at him that he realized what was going on. Panduola looked at him with a smile. Dake finally put his hand on her palm. Then, the two of them stepped onto the stage together and danced with the other students. As the big stars of this year's masquerade ball, Dake and Panduola had their own aura and attracted most of the attention as soon as they appeared. The two of them almost immediately became the center of attention. However, they were already used to this level of attention. After they started dancing, they only had eyes for each other. Nirvana +1. Dake didn't let go of her hand until the song ended. Panduola whispered in his ear, "Wait for me after the ball." Then, she floated away and met up with Hephaestus, who had just walked out of the professor's seat. The mother and daughter pair enjoyed their first Halloween ball together. On the other side, White Gouda retracted her gaze and sat in a corner with Fresh Blood Concubine, who had mixed in with the crowd. After Dake's song ended, Betty immediately grabbed him. Betty and Panduola were both fifth-year students of the Magic Academy, so they naturally knew each other. Even if they weren't close before, they were now. In short, she let Dake go for the first time tonight, but she wasn't going to let him go for the second time. Dake immediately started the second dance. When the song ended, Senior Sister Betty said gently, "Happy Halloween." "Happy Halloween." Dake smiled. Then, the two of them separated and walked off the stage. However, as soon as Dake walked off the stage, he was immediately stopped by Deanna and Luo C. Looking at Deanna's outstretched hand, he had no choice but to hold it and return to the stage. Luo C looked at their backs and secretly smiled. She couldn't help but feel a little lonely. Dake was destined to be unable to stop today's ball. Not only Deanna, who wanted to take over his remaining time, but also Luo C, Miss Vampire, and Phoenix, who were quietly waiting for him. There were also the two little princesses who were wearing little bear and tiger skins, who were dancing together with a fighting spirit. He couldn't avoid any of them. He danced one song after another, and his dance partners changed one after another. On the way, he saw his own magic elf and bear cub dancing happily among the crowd. From 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, the Halloween ball finally came to an end when the clock struck the hour. The students who were tired and sleepy left the banquet hall one by one. After the last song with Deanna, Dake said goodbye to her and also left the banquet hall. Panduola walked out a little later, but she quickly caught up with him. The two of them walked up to the second floor of the castle and began to trade under the moonlight. "I can give you this." The moment Senior Panduola opened her mouth, Dake was astonished. He looked at the gift box in Senior Panduola's hand and couldn't help but swallow his saliva. He said, "This is Bichimo's horn?" Panduola nodded slightly and said with a smile, "If you don't want it, I can exchange it for something else, such as dragon scales, dragon blood, or dragon orbs." Dake's eyelids twitched. He asked, "What do you want?" "I don't ask for much," Panduola said slowly. "I have 3 magic elves, and I want you to help them awaken their spiritual intelligence." 3 magic elves. Dake frowned slightly. He had helped Panduola's young winged dragon awaken its spiritual intelligence, so it wasn't strange for Panduola to make such a request. But why 3? He couldn't help but ask, "Which 3? Panduola said in detail, "The first, pure white dragon maiden. The second, celestial white dragon. And the third, Bichimo's earth tyrannosaurus." Dake couldn't help but repeat, "Bichimo's earth tyrannosaurus?" Panduola nodded. "I used Bichimo's horn that I obtained last year to refine into earth tyrannosaurus. Although it doesn't suit my aesthetics, it's a genuine 10-star dragon species." Dake couldn't help but ask, "How did you refine a 10-star dragon species?" Panduola raised a finger and placed it in front of her lips. She said in a low voice, "This is a secret." That's true. Dake realized that he had misspoken. Although Bichimo's horn had always been considered a high-grade material that could be used to refine 4th-rank magic elves, in recent years, there were people who obtained Bichimo's horn almost every year, but there weren't many who succeeded in refining 4th-rank magic elves. To be able to use it and successfully refine a 10-star dragon species, Panduola must have used some unique method. It obviously wasn't something that she could casually divulge. He said, "But since you've already succeeded once, why don't you use Bichimo's horn to refine another 10-star magic elven card? Panduola sighed. 4th rank magic elves aren't that easy to refine. In order to refine it, I practically emptied out all the resources that I've painstakingly accumulated over the past few years. I even used an extremely special material as the core before I barely succeeded. Moreover, after refining it in reverse, I discovered that I might have made a loss. Dake, don't be anxious. Panduola smiled again. Bichimo's horn is indeed difficult to deal with, but you can save it and deal with it when you can, or ask the professors to give you some guidance. Dake sighed and said, Can I take a look at it first? If this Bichimo's horn was used carelessly, it would be a reckless waste of God's gift. But if it wasn't used carelessly, according to Senior Panduola's words, it might only be used as a primer that would refine magic into the phantom god seed. In that case, its value would change from that of a core material to that of an auxiliary material. The difference could be said to be enormous. But considering that Bichimo's horn was just a component that could be regenerated continuously, Senior Panduola's approach was very likely correct. Dake watched as Senior Panduola opened the gift box and took out a small section of Bichimo's horn. Then, he stretched out his hand. Panduola placed Bichimo's horn in his palm and said, You can feel that it doesn't contain much magic power. Dake closed his eyes and carefully sensed it. After a long while, he had to admit that Panduola's words were true. The magic power contained within this section of Bichimo's horn was much weaker than he had imagined. But if it was only used as a primer to refine the phantom god seed, do you think I lack this stuff? Dake couldn't help but think. He lacked a lot of things, but he didn't lack primers like this. If Bichimo's horn couldn't be used as a core material to refine a 4th-step magic guiding fairy, then its value to him would be greatly reduced. Rather than that, he might as well exchange it for high-grade materials such as dragon scales, dragon pearls, and dragon blood. With enough high-grade dragon-type materials, he would be able to start researching the refinement of the blue-eyed white dragon. Moreover, high-grade dragon-type materials could be used together with dragon grass to refine even if they were ordinary materials. That was indeed much more suitable than Bichimo's horn. Moreover, from the bottom of his heart, he believed that he didn't need Bichimo's horn as a price at all to help the 3 magic guiding fairies gain intelligence, because it was simply too easy for him. How about this? Just exchange it for some dragon-type materials for me, Dake finally confirmed. Then, he returned Bichimo's horn to Panduola. If he really wanted Bichimo's horn, next year or the year after, he would have plenty of opportunities to obtain it with his own hands, and not from others. Bichimo's horn was a unique material of the Shang Malian Academy, so it still had some value beyond the material itself. The significance of obtaining it with one's own hands was much greater than obtaining it from others. Panduola put Bichimo's horn back into the gift box and said, Since you don't want Bichimo's horn, I will prepare dragon-type materials of equivalent value. But it will take some time before I can give them to you. Do you have any specific requirements for the quality, type, or part? Dake thought for a while and said, I hope it's a white dragon material of higher quality. I don't have too many requirements for the specific part, but it would be better if there's a white dragon pearl. In addition, other types of dragon-type materials can also be obtained. Although it's a pity, I'm still at the stage of confirming the target based on the materials. I haven't reached the stage of choosing materials based on the target. I'll do my best to prepare it properly, Panduola said cheerfully. Dake didn't refuse. He was also very clear that to other people, being able to awaken intelligence for their own magical fairy was something that they yearned for even in their dreams. In fact, if he wanted to, he could use this ability to exchange for a large amount of resources. But firstly, he hadn't reached the resource shortage stage yet. Secondly, this was the power of a demon god. If he revealed too much, it would be a great threat to himself. Oh. Let's start with Pure White Dragon Maiden. Dake looked around and said, Up until now, all the Great Sin cards he had on him had finished their cooldown. According to the attributes of the magical fairy, he could choose a suitable Great Sin card to awaken intelligence for it. For example, this pure white dragon maiden was a demi-human, draconian, and a dragon-type plus fairy. The two opposing attributes were wonderfully stacked together, giving it an extremely rare ability. Using Bliss's Great Sin card to awaken intelligence was the most suitable. As a dragon-type, and a dragon-type plus light-type, the Sky White Dragon was more suitable for Pride's Great Sin card. Although he didn't do much research, Dake roughly believed that the difference in the Great Sin card used to awaken intelligence was very likely to have a permanent impact on the magical fairy's personality. Therefore, he couldn't be too casual when choosing the Great Sin card. Panduola didn't say much and directly summoned the pure white dragon maiden by the window. She didn't use a sacrificial summoning spell, but a secret special summoning spell. Dake's eyelids twitched when he saw this. She had actually directly summoned a 6-star magic guiding fairy. Seeing his surprise, Panduola smiled and said, "I rarely do this in a duel. After all, there are some external factors involved. But it's not a problem to tell you. My dragon maiden can be specially summoned without any sacrifices as long as a white dragon is present. It's the same type of sure kill skill effect as Vampire's secret ritual of Daughter of the Vampire." Dake expressed that he understood. As for why Panduola could directly summon the pure white dragon maiden on the spot, it was naturally because her existence could satisfy the special summoning conditions of the pure white dragon maiden. This effect made him very tempted. This pure white dragon maiden could be used together with the primordial dragon egg. After using the dragon egg to hatch the young blue-eyed dragon, he could summon the pure white dragon maiden seamlessly. If he drew 2 6-stars at the same time in the first round, just thinking about it scared him. Dake walked in front of the pure white dragon maiden to observe. Upon closer inspection, the pure white dragon maiden's face was somewhat similar to Senior Panduola's. She had dragon horns on her head and a cold face. The white battle robe on her body clung tightly to her graceful body, accentuating her figure perfectly. There was also a long spear slanted behind her back that was as red as blood. "Senior," Dake turned around and said. Panduola understood and turned around. With her back facing Dake, she left the pure white dragon maiden for him to deal with. Dake then took out a Bliss 3 card from the deck. After silently reciting that the summoning was successful, he faced the Bliss 3 card at the pure white dragon maiden. Under the golden pink light, the pure white dragon maiden's cold face melted little by little. In the end, her brows relaxed and a deep sense of joy appeared on her face. Dake suddenly took a step back and quickly said, "Senior, it's done. Please recall it." When Panduola turned around, she cancelled the pure white dragon maiden summoning. Dake let out a sigh of relief and said, "It will take at least 15 minutes for it to return to a state where it can think normally." "Got it." Panduola looked at the pure white dragon maiden's card and suppressed her urge to communicate with it. She raised her head and said, "Next, is it the Sky White Dragon?" Dake said decisively, "If it's the Sky White Dragon, why don't we summon it in the secret passage?" "Secret passage?" Panduola was puzzled. Dake said, "The secret passage can hide most of the aura. And it's big enough." After Panduola became the Platinum Star, she received the door card as a reward. Under Dake's urging, she activated the door card, and said helplessly, "I'm actually not that interested in the secret passage." Dake waved his door card, and said with a smile, "But the door cards have the ability to communicate with each other. As long as I'm in the academy, I can receive your messages." Pandora's interest was piqued. "Is it a structure similar to the branch card?" Dake said, "Yes, but the campus card can only receive messages, while the door card can send messages." Panduola was slightly excited. "So, if I want to find you in the future, I only need to use this door card?" "That's right." Dake suggested, "Do you want to try it?" Panduola immediately nodded and studied it for a long time. Finally, she used the door card to send a message to Dake, "Hello. Dake also used the door card to reply, "Good evening, Senior." Panduola quickly typed, "Good evening to you too. The moon is nice tonight. Happy Halloween." Dake, "Happy Halloween." The two walked side by side and looked down at the door card in their hands. They were right next to each other, but they only used the door card to send messages to each other. It was like the first time you got a phone and added a friend of the opposite sex on QQ. Panduola was having a lot of fun as if she got a new toy. Dake felt nostalgic and couldn't help but immerse himself in it. Unknowingly, the two entered the secret passage. Panduola suddenly came back to her senses and blushed. "Do I summon the celestial white dragon here?" Dake also looked up and said, "Yes." Soon, a white dragon that was close to 20 meters long flew out of the special summoning array. It stretched its limbs in the air and emitted a gentle glow. "Come here." Panduola called the celestial white dragon back and ordered it to stay put. She quickly turned around. Dake took out Pride 3 and pointed the card at the celestial white dragon's huge head. He quickly summoned it. Under the illumination of the dark golden light, the sky white dragon's expression changed at an extremely fast speed. Roar! It suddenly raised its head and roared. Its dragon aura was even more terrifying than before, and it emitted a piercingly cold aura. When the roar ended, it looked down like a real dragon with the arrogance of looking down on ants. Panduola suddenly turned around and looked at the celestial white dragon with joy. The most direct feeling she had right now was that the celestial white dragon was alive. 54 of 139. The Halloween reward is 12 chapters. As expected, it's not much. It's been added and will be paid back as soon as possible. Today is also a 10,000-word chapter. Brothers, don't stop buying tickets and blades. In the situation where the subscriptions are falling, only the tickets can be consoled. Degree, 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 degree woo-woo. Good night. Chapter 641. Pure White Dragon Maiden and Sky White Dragon. They were the magical spirits that Panduola had refined at the beginning of her second year and the end of her third year. As the Pure White Dragon Maiden had the ultimate skill, White Dragon Princess, it could be specially summoned without any sacrifice in the presence of a white dragon. Therefore, whenever Panduola needed to do something, it would be summoned as an assistant. In addition, the core materials used to refine the Pure White Dragon Maiden were provided by herself, so there was a natural bloodline connection between them. She had always treated it as her family. As a result, the vague bond that was gradually established allowed the Pure White Dragon Maiden to gain some spirituality. However, she was not satisfied with that little spirituality, especially after the winged dragon whelp was awakened by Dake. She wanted the Pure White Dragon Maiden to gain spirituality and become a true family member. This was what Panduola had always thought. When she added the Sky White Dragon and Bichimo's Tyrannosaurus to the deal, it was more for the sake of increasing her strength. Website: https://m Vipkanchu. VIP. Although the reunion with her mother, Hephaestus, made her feel the warmth of a family, at the same time, it also brought about an extremely urgent anxiety. This was because Hephaestus Doragon was still a criminal wanted by the Holy Church. The Shang-Malian Academy could protect her for a while, but it could not protect her for life. If Panduola wanted to protect her mother, she had to become stronger. She slowly walked in front of the Sky White Dragon, and opened her arms to it with a smile on her face. The Sky White Dragon's arrogance actually slowly disappeared after staring at her for a long time. Its huge head with antlers drooped down and fell between Panduola's arms. Panduola stroked the Sky White Dragon's face and smiled like a flower. Dake stood at the side and watched quietly. He was actually quite surprised that the Sky White Dragon actually let go of its arrogance under the gaze of Panduola. Maybe this is the dragon's personality? A few minutes later, Panduola finally let go of her arm, but she did not put the celestial white dragon back into the card. This was because Bichimo's Tyrannosaurus Rex required a third-tier offering. After offering a 1-star magical elf and a 9-star sky dragon as sacrifices, Panduola finally summoned a 4th-tier magical elf, Bichimo's Tyrannosaurus. Roar! When the 10-star elfin walked out of the sacrificial summoning array, a powerful aura comparable to that of the final boss, Bichimo's, spread out like a storm. Unfortunately, the two people standing in front of it were not people who would be shocked by this level of aura. Even so, Dake still raised his head and sighed. So this is a dragon refined using Bichimo's horn? Panduola nodded and said, he inherited Bichimo's earth attribute. He's a Tyrannosaurus Rex of dragon and earth attribute. Dake couldn't help but observe carefully. This, Bichimo's Tyrannosaurus Rex, was even bigger than Noah Sharp's Reedridge Black Dragon in terms of size. It was basically a Tyrannosaurus Rex without wings. The huge curved horns on its head were almost the same as Bichimo's horns. According to Panduola's words, it should be the same as Bichimo's. It couldn't fly. As a phantom god seed, Bichimo's Tyrannosaurus Rex emitted an aura that was mixed with some divinity. Even though that trace of divinity was so small that it was undetectable, Dake was still quite familiar with this aura and could somewhat smell it. He just didn't know if Hypostasis +1 was one of its characteristics. The Magus divided the magical elf into 4 tiers. The 4th tier was theoretically the highest tier. No matter how high its star level rose, it couldn't escape this framework. However, if it had the characteristic of Hypostasis +1, it could reach the legendary 5th tier. The Magus called it Divine Tier. Senior, Dake voiced his doubts. Panduola shook her head with slight regret and said, it's not enough. That's really a pity, Dake sighed slightly and said, I'm going to start. Panduola nodded and said, okay, I'll turn around. Dake shook his head helplessly. Actually, I wanted to say it just now. There's no need. There was really no need. He reached into his card bag and directly took out the 3rd Great Sin card, Greed 3. Greed pointed to Saturn, and its main attributes were rock and ground. Since Bichimo's Tyrannosaurus Rex was a ground-type phantom god seed, there was no mistake in using Greed 3. Panduola didn't turn around this time. Instead, she openly looked at the magic card in Dake's hand. In fact, the aura released by Dake when he used the Great Sin card was very obvious. Even if she turned around and didn't look, she could guess 90% of it. The fact that Dake was willing to use it by her side was already a sign of trust. However, she was still very happy that Dake said it himself. In the name of Dake Dimeng, I summon the magic card, Awaken, Bichimo's Tyrannosaurus Rex. Before his voice died away, Dake raised Greed 3 high up. The bluish-purple radiance shot out from the card's surface and shone on Bichimo's Tyrannosaurus Rex. After this ferocious-looking Tyrannosaurus Rex absorbed the power of greed, endless greed gushed out from the depths of its eyes. With the passage of time, greed would recede. However, its spiritual wisdom that had been awakened would not disappear. Bichimo's Tyrannosaurus Rex suddenly bent down and let out a thunderous roar at the 2 tiny humans on the ground. The 2 people's hair was blown back by the strong wind caused by this. Dake couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Panduola, on the other hand, immediately issued a forceful command. However, at that moment, the aura emitted by Bichimo's Tyrannosaurus Rex suddenly underwent a subtle change. Dake couldn't help but reveal a somewhat strange expression after noticing that slight change. Panduola's senses were just as sharp. After a brief moment of astonishment, she immediately raised the card, Bichimo's Tyrannosaurus Rex, in front of her and injected her magic power to examine it. How is it? Dake asked. Panduola raised her head and slowly said, It's here. Dake asked, What's here? Panduola looked at Bichimo's Tyrannosaurus Rex and said in astonishment, Hypostasis +1. Bichimo's Tyrannosaurus Rex, whose eyes were filled with greed, froze in place under the forceful command of the Magus. Gradually, a blackish-purple radiance appeared on the surface of its body. The divinity that was originally indiscernible had actually increased tremendously. If its original divinity was only 0.01, then its current divinity was at least 1. From a negligible decimal, it had become a whole number. This meant that it had truly awakened the hypostasis of a phantom god. Although this divinity was still incomparable to Dake's Basti Beast and Moon God, it was still a breakthrough for it. Panduola stared at the Bichimo's Tyrannosaurus Rex that had undergone a drastic change, the astonishment on her face lingering for a long time. It was only after she had stored Bichimo's Tyrannosaurus Rex into the card that Panduola said solemnly, "It seems that I have received an unimaginable favor." Dake smiled faintly and said, "This is only a transaction of equal value." Panduola gave a rare wry smile and said, "If it's equal," Dake said, "don't take it to heart. This is also an unexpected change for me. However, we can't overturn the agreed-upon transaction because of a sudden increase in the price of a commodity. Let's go according to the original agreement." Panduola took a deep breath and said with a smile, "I understand." Dake nodded and said, "That's good. Since the intelligence of the 3 magical spirits has been awakened, it's about time for us to go back." Panduola replied, "That's true. Let's go back." The two of them walked side by side toward the entrance of the secret passage. The torches on both sides of the secret passage lit up one after another, illuminating the path ahead. The footsteps of the two gradually synchronized in the quiet night. Dake lowered his head slightly, thinking about the changes in Bichimo's Tyrannosaurus Rex and the meaning it represented. Panduola was also digesting the shock in her heart. She had a deeper understanding of the power Dake possessed. Unknowingly, they had already exited the secret passage and returned to the passage of the castle. Then Dake turned around slightly, preparing to discuss with Panduola where to go next. But just as he turned around, he suddenly smelled an extremely close fragrance. Then, a deep and moist mark was left on his cheek. In the blink of an eye, Panduola Doragon's figure disappeared. Dake's eyes widened. He raised his hand and touched his right cheek, confirming that he had indeed been ambushed. "You don't talk about martial virtues." His heart started to thump loudly. The notifications of bliss's growth kept floating in front of his eyes. This made him quickly come back to his senses, and he used Underworld Spirit Spell to suppress the growth of bliss. Tonight's deal was quite profitable. After that, Dake didn't immediately return to the tower. Instead, he enjoyed the breeze on Lover's Bridge for a while, thinking about the meaning of life. Only then did he walk toward the tower. Tonight was a special time. The academy didn't have a curfew. Dake pushed open the door of the tower and found that there were still students playing in the common lounge. He avoided the heat wave and went straight up the stairs, arriving at the door of dorm 301. It was already 2:40 a.m. on November 1st. But because Halloween was on Friday this year, the next 3 days were all holidays. The students could sleep until they woke up naturally without worrying about having their credits deducted by the professors. Click. Dake opened the door and entered. The dorm room was very quiet. Although the magic elves had returned early, they didn't continue to make noise in the room. Most of them had already climbed onto their small beds. They were either closing their eyes to take a nap or lying down to read. When he walked into the room, the magic elves all turned to look at him. Then, those that were sleeping went to sleep, and those that were reading continued to read. The sound of Kitty Grass's steady breathing came from the cradle at the head of the bed. Dake tiptoed into the bedroom. He took out the cane hanging at his waist and slowly put it down. Then, he took off his coat, took out his pajamas from the closet, and quietly crept into the bathroom. After washing up, he walked out of the bathroom. He glanced at the 2 holy swords hanging on the wall and the backpack full of loot. Suddenly, he remembered something. I forgot to give Victoria a present. Forget it, I'll think about it tomorrow. Dake happily climbed onto the bed. Just as he was about to close his eyes and sleep, the card bag at the head of the bed suddenly vibrated. He took the card bag with some doubt and pulled out. It wasn't the school card, but the door card. "What's the matter?" Dake activated the door card by injecting magic power, then opened the door card. Senior Pan Duola? She's so late. What's up? Dark opened the message and saw that there were only 2 words in the letter. Good night. Good night. Dake typed the same words and sent it over. Then, he put the door card at the head of the bed and crawled into bed. That night, he slept very soundly. The corners of his mouth were raised the entire time. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the autumn sun shone into the room. Dake woke up in the arms of 2 beauties. He rubbed his eyes and reached out to pinch Fairy Ibu's little paws. Then, he happily got out of bed and washed up. It was the first morning of November. There were many things he needed to take care of, but that would be after breakfast. On the desk, there was already a food basket with newspapers. Little Fiend wrapped it in a thick towel to prevent the internal heat from leaking out. After washing up, Dake sat in front of the desk and took off the towel. He ate the still warm breakfast and gave Little Fiend a little red flower as a reward. Halloween. The Great Sage Daily and Clown Daily both used special holiday pages. Most of the information they published was related to Halloween, especially the various things that happened on the eve of Halloween. Some things were very interesting, and some things were completely unfunny. Dake finished reading all of it. His mood didn't change at all. Then, he put the cutlery back in the food basket and had Little Fiend return it. Then, he summoned the system list. System, expand the list. Pride, 92-92, Envy, 43-43, Rage, 92-91, Sloth, 60-60, Greed, 98-94, Gluttony, 87-90, Bliss, 93-98. In the last absorption in October, Dake chose Pride. At that time, his Great Sin Index had been suppressed to below 90, but after 20 days of suffering, all the indices increased again. Pride's growth was still within an acceptable range, and Rage's growth was also under control. However, Greed had increased back to 94 after absorbing 8 points last month. It was obvious that greed was human nature, and it was hard to control. The growth of Gluttony was actually under control. When it reached 94 points, Dake would consider taking 4 points and use 3 of them to cultivate Gluttony 2 to study Gluttony. Finally, there was the growth of Bliss. On the 10th of October, Bliss was only at 90 points. Now, it had increased by 8 points and became the highest value, Great Sin. Although this was to be expected, it was still a pity. Dake smiled helplessly and calculated the remaining Great Sin reserves. Pride 4, Greed 10, Bliss 0, Rage 1. It's okay. Although I've always wanted to save more, I feel like I can't. Dake recorded the data, opened his backpack, and began to calculate what he had obtained last night. Basically, all the materials were obtained by conquering resource points, but occasionally, special ghosts would drop gift boxes. Therefore, he had obtained more than 20 materials last night. However, most of them were normal materials, and they could even be bought in Traveler's Street. The 50,000 academic credits he had obtained from the Masquerade Ball had made his academic credit reserves rich again. He divided the materials into 2 portions, and then arranged the higher quality ones according to the order he had obtained them: Ocean Ice Shell, Soul Orb, King of Spectres, Black Tide Gem, Black Tide Octopus, Worm Silver, Abyss Worm, Soul Orb, Dark Mummy, Ghost Snake Magic Crystal, Ghost Snake, Water Elemental Bead, Water Elemental, Ocean Ice Shell, was an item he had obtained after conquering the 6th resource point. Its grade was relatively low, but the ice element it contained was very pure. It was a more suitable material for refining an ice-type magic elf. Black Tide Gem was the gem he had obtained after killing the octopus monster hiding in the dark when he conquered the 8th resource point. It contained rich dark and water elemental energy. As for Worm Silver, Ghost Snake Magic Crystal, and Water Elemental Bead, there was no need to mention them. The remaining 2 Soul Orbs, came from the elite ghosts of the 7th and 10th resource points respectively. However, the soul orb dropped by the Dark Mummy was completely inferior to the soul orb dropped by the King of Spectres in terms of quality. In summary, among these 7 items, the rarest worm silver was the worm silver. The highest grade was the ghost snake magic crystal. The water elemental bead, worm silver, and the soul orb dropped by the King of Spectres were of the same grade. After that were the black tie gem and the soul orb dropped by the Dark Mummy. Ocean ice shell was of the lowest grade, but it might be able to be used to refine big tongue shell. Big tongue shell could evolve into spiked shell, a defense specialized Pokemon. However, considering that there was no jealousy great sin card that represented the water element, this was actually not a good idea. Dake's main focus was on the spirit type, soul orb, and ghost snake magic crystal. Now that bliss had skyrocketed, it was suitable for refining a spirit type magic elf. Considering that the ghost snake magic crystal was too specialized and the King of Spectres' soul orb was more suitable, Dake temporarily locked onto this soul orb. After I draw enough bliss, I'll consider refining it. It's also time to add a new family member. Dake carefully observed the pitch black and round soul orb, and could not help but smile. When it came to the spirit type, the first thing he thought of was the Ghosty family. Ghosty, Gungu-A. Then, there was the previously mentioned pink magic elf, Soroya. Soroya had 2 forms. One was the evil type evil fox Pokemon, and the other was the normal type plus spirit type resentment fox Pokemon. Soroya, from the Washing Jade region, was originally a fox cub. Its body was grayish pink, and its pupils were orange. The long fur on its neck was like a scarf, and its limbs, the area around its eyes, and the protruding flame-shaped fur on its head were all pinkish-white. Even though it often looked like it was complaining, it still could not hide its cuteness. As for the evolved Curse Fox Pokemon, Soroya, it was also very handsome. Considering that Soroya and Sorajak were the only fox Pokemon with a ghost type, and that he happened to have Foxgrass, there was a high chance that the basic refining result would be locked onto it. Of course, Bliss's reserves were currently 0, and there was a high chance that he would refine Clown Mask first, so there was no need to be too anxious. In the future, he might be able to come up with a better result. Let's put it aside for now. It's Halloween today, and there's the opening ceremony of the Golden Cup in the afternoon. I can't be held back by experiments. Dake closed his notebook and sorted out all the materials before starting to prepare Halloween gifts. Halloween wasn't Christmas, so there wasn't much meaning in giving gifts. Basically, giving each other candy and biscuits was enough. Dake's main target was Victoria. He wanted to wrap up the blood crystal and holy sword of blood and give them away. It couldn't be helped. The White Gouda hadn't been able to obtain a new holy sword during this period. If he couldn't exchange it with someone, giving it to Victoria was the best choice. I wonder how she will use these 2 gifts. Dake thought absent-mindedly. Victoria was a student of the House of Fools. However, on Halloween, Traveler's Street opened early. She would most likely drag Phoenix to Traveler's Street to shop. However, if Dake wanted to find her or summon her to his side, it wouldn't be difficult. Of course, he wouldn't summon her to his side without permission. After preparing everything, Dake walked out of his dorm and headed to Traveler's Street. Traveler's Street was bustling with people and was very lively. The students didn't seem to enjoy themselves at last night's masquerade party. There were still many students in costume walking back and forth on the street. Dake first went to the Ultimate Duel Club shop and chatted with Eve. When Victoria took the bait, he threw the blood crystal and holy sword of blood to her. "What's this?" Victoria asked curiously with her eyes wide open. "A gift." Dake glanced at her. Victoria immediately said, "I know it's a gift, but what's in the box? Why is it emitting such a fragrant smell? Can I open it here?" "No," Dake said decisively. "Go back to the dorm and take a look." Victoria exclaimed, "How can this be?" Dake reminded her, "By the way, It's time to return the credits you borrowed." "You really have to return them?" Victoria exclaimed again. Dake rolled his eyes. "Of course." Victoria said, "Okay." She reluctantly took out her school card and returned the borrowed credits to Dake. Then, Phoenix also returned the 1,000 credits that had been borrowed. Dake gave her a Halloween gift. After Victoria and Phoenix left hand in hand, Dake finally got up and said to Eve, "I'm leaving. Happy Halloween." "Happy Halloween." Eve smiled and sent him to the door. Dake thought for a while and said, "Also, help me say Happy Halloween to Irene. Also, I'll come again tonight. Be prepared." "Yes, young master." Eve bowed slightly. Dake nodded and left Travelers Street. When Victoria returned to the dorm and opened the gift box, she was pleasantly surprised. After leaving Travelers Street, Dake went to the club classroom. Keeping his promise, he would leave Big Milk Can in the club classroom to take care of the Catgrass and Little Auntie Bird. Then, he put Curse Cage, Sub-Beast into the deck. Big Milk Can had a great time at last night's masquerade party, so it gladly agreed to this situation. The Sub-Beast jumped excitedly. But Dake shook his head and said, "Don't be happy too early. I did sign up for the Golden Cup, but this holiday schedule will be released after the opening ceremony, so it might not be my turn. Even if it's my turn, you might not be able to participate." The Sub-Beast's expression froze, and it suddenly didn't want to jump anymore. Dake laughed and patted its head. "Don't worry, there will always be a chance." The opening ceremony of the Golden Cup was held at 2 in the afternoon. At that time, as a close partner of the Shang Malian Academy, the representative of the Citizen Duel Club, Ms. Eve, would also be on the stage. The purpose of her appearance was naturally to promote the Simulated Duel Halloween-themed cards. At that time, all the branches of St. Marian College would display Halloween-themed duel discs, as well as Halloween-themed Easter eggs containing models and cards. There would be a probability that a Halloween-themed limited edition card would be opened inside. The promotion of the simulated duel had been done very well so far, and the sales were increasing day by day. It had completely shown the trend of being popular all over the country. There were many people who paid a lot of money to get rare cards. When the simulated duel really became popular, both the Citizen Duel Club and the Shang Malian Academy would make a lot of money. As for the rules of the Golden Cup, it was not much different from the Silver Cup. The Golden Cup was also divided into the points competition and the main competition. The students who stood out in the points competition would be able to enter the main competition. The number of people in the main competition of the Golden Cup was twice the number of people in the Silver Cup. There would be a total of 16 people who could enter the main competition. Before the double elimination system, there would be a round of home games. The other rules of the competition were basically the same as the Silver Cup. Every participant had to go through at least 10 duels in the points competition. After 10 duels, the accumulated points would enter the rankings. The top 16 participants on the points competition would enter the main competition. When Dake came to the cafeteria, he found that the topic among the students had completely changed from Halloween to the Golden Cup. The Golden Cup every year was a grand event for the students of the academy. The duelists participated in the competition to hone their skills and improve quickly. The audience watched the competition to increase their knowledge and get pleasure from it. The bloody battles between the seniors were obviously more exciting than the fights between the juniors. Therefore, the Golden Cup received far more attention than the Silver Cup. However, this year's second-year duelists were all ordered to participate in the Golden Cup. They were like lambs that had sneaked into a pack of wolves. No one knew what kind of impact they would bring to the Golden Cup. As long as the second year was mentioned, the first seat of the second-year students, Dake Dimming, couldn't escape. As soon as Dake sat down, he heard the students at the 2 tables behind him saying his name. He shook his head slightly and buried his head in eating. He didn't know what would happen to the other second-year duelists. But he knew that he would go very far. When he thought about how he would be able to win against the 3rd, 4th, and even 5th years on the duel stage, he couldn't suppress his excitement. People only felt the meaning of life when they challenged the higher places. It was the same for duelists. We finally found you, Dake. The two little princesses sat opposite Dake, one on his left and one on his right. Dake opened his mouth and said, "Are you here to return the money?" "Hey, it's credits." And Chi emphasized. "Yeah, it sounds bad to return the money," Anna immediately agreed. Although they didn't seem to have a close relationship on the surface, their personalities and temperaments were the same as their appearances. It was as if they were made from the same mold. Dake took out his school card, placed it on the table, and said, "Come." "Really?" Anna and Chi also took out their school cards and returned the debt. Dake asked, "How was it? Did you have fun last night?" As soon as they talked about last night, the two little princesses instantly opened their mouths. They proudly talked about their glorious deeds last night and counted the students who were scared to death by them. Dake's eyebrows twitched when he saw how proud they were. If these two girls were his, he might have picked up a stick to kill them. Unfortunately, they weren't. "Good afternoon, can I sit here?" As the two little princesses were talking, Aurora came to the side with a tray. Of course, Dake wouldn't refuse her, so she asked the little princesses opposite her. The two little princesses instantly fell silent. Aurora tacitly agreed and sat down. As soon as she sat down, she said helplessly, "Last night, I didn't do it on purpose. I couldn't control myself." The two little princesses looked at each other. Anna said with an open-minded expression, "It's okay, our Chi is so magnanimous. She's not angry at all." And Chi immediately pouted and said, Yes, and Chi isn't angry, but the stingy Anna is." "I'm not angry," Anna said angrily. And Chi made a face and said, "Ha ha ha." Dake said helplessly, "Be quiet when you eat. At least maintain your princess image in public." Anna and Chi said at the same time, "That's our personality. Even if people see us, they will only say that we are very energetic." Dake said, "Naughty. Haha." Anna laughed carelessly and finally started to eat. And Chi glanced at Aurora and suddenly said, "You borrowed it too?" Aurora took out her school card and paid the debt without hesitation. "Yes." And Chi snorted and said, "Then I lost a little. I heard that you can join the dueling club next semester. Let's compete then." Aurora simply replied, "Yes." Dake couldn't help but be curious. What happened between them? However, he knew that now was not the time to ask. It was best to close the door and slowly ask at night. The atmosphere before the start of the Golden Cup was not as peaceful as it was now. After knowing that the second-year duelists would participate in the Golden Cup, some of the upperclassmen secretly revealed their malice. "Let's show those overconfident juniors what a real duel is." Similar words could be heard everywhere. As for those who already had grudges with some of the second-year students, they even wanted to execute them in the dueling arena. Some people who were dead but not dead were also fantasizing about the possibility of a comeback. The upperclassmen were not all friendly. What's more, there was competition among the major schools. If they could take the opportunity to suppress the students of other schools and strangle the seedlings of hope, it would be greatly beneficial to their own school. The problems that existed in the Golden Cup might be magnified due to the large number of second-year students entering the Golden Cup. And among them, Dake Dimeng was obviously not to be trifled with, but there were also many people who had their eyes on him. A large number of them were people who had their blood sucked by him last night. Those upperclassmen who were defeated in the duel gritted their teeth and waited for the opportunity to take revenge. There were also all kinds of people with ulterior motives who had their eyes on the Golden Cup. This year's second-year students might really not be underestimated. But no one thought that they could go too far. The afternoon sun was warm, and the open-air duel arena was painted with a layer of bright gold. It was really golden. Just like the opening ceremony of the Silver Cup, the school added a layer of gold to the open-air duel arena, causing the arena to suddenly become majestic and noble. At 1:30 a.m., all the students in the academy swarmed into the dueling hall. The Golden Cup did not have any requirements for the seats of the audience. The students could freely choose their seats. As a result, the students of the four schools were clearly divided into four groups. Dake was lucky enough to get a seat in the first row. Next to him were the second-year students of the Aristocrat Academy. Anna and Luo C sat on his left. The two of them did not feel nervous at all because of the opening ceremony of the Golden Cup. The frequent duels and dungeon exploration had indeed trained their minds. Dake and Doran, who was on his right, whispered to each other as they waited for the opening ceremony to arrive. Soon, the ring-shaped auditorium was neatly filled with people. The host, Senior Judy, who had changed into a golden dress, went up the raised stage a little earlier. Today, she was even more luxurious and charming. Along with the elegant melody, she raised her hand and let the little elf in the princess dress land on her palm. She gently flicked the forehead of the familiar and then let it fly away. Almost at the same time, the projections of the audience from all the major regions appeared in the auditorium outside the arena. In the area of the Royal City's duel arena, Claire, who had returned to the Royal City, appeared in the first row with Arvette as expected. Beside Arvette was Silver Wolf Knight, Camilla and Viscountess Flotty. The motherly group formed by the three of them became more and more familiar with each other. And because of this, the three families became closer and closer. Claire even invited Viscountess Flotty to join the business network of the Duel of the Whole People. Like the Eugenie Chamber of Commerce, she would be responsible for the sales of the Duel of the Whole People. The Flotty family was already far away from the power center of the royal city. Finding one or two trustworthy agents to develop the business could be considered as working hard to protect the family business. Therefore, they quickly agreed. Not long after, Lady Camilla couldn't bear the loneliness and joined in. Their small circle had become a group of people with common interests. Now, the four of them put down their various matters and came to the duel arena again. Other than wanting to see their treasures at the opening ceremony of the Golden Cup, they also wanted to see the reaction of the first version of the Duel of the Whole People. When it was 2 p.m., Princess Elisha finally arrived and sat on the other side of Claire. "I'm not late, right?" she whispered. Claire said, "It just started." Elisha let out a sigh of relief. Because she was busy with work, she missed the opening ceremony of the Silver Cup last month. This time, she was free and wanted to take a look. Another reason was that she noticed that her brother was going to the duel arena more and more frequently. Although she didn't know why her brother would take time out of his busy schedule to watch the duel, since her brother did this, she had to follow. Maybe she could find out something. First Prince Charles had also come to the scene today. Beside him, there was the chief archbishop who hadn't been seen for a long time. The appearance of Archbishop Caleb Norris seemed to indicate that the Holy Church's affairs were going smoothly so far. The Holy Judgment operation was very effective. "Ladies and gentlemen, hello, I'm Judy. It's my honor to be the host of the Golden Cup." Following Senior Judy's formal self-introduction, the opening ceremony of the Golden Cup finally officially began. The audience listened to her voice, and the atmosphere gradually became more and more lively. As the representative of the Duel of the Whole People, Eve also went on stage and introduced the development and update of the Duel of the Whole People to the audience. She also publicly showed some of the new card packs and limited edition cards with a Halloween theme. With the cooperation of the Academy, the demonstration was very good. After her promotion, Senior Judy went on stage again and announced loudly, "The opening ceremony of the opening ceremony is over. This is the end of the opening ceremony. Next is the first day of the Gold Cup that we have been waiting for." During the short break before the start of the first day of the competition, each library will randomly select 10 lucky audience members. The selected audience members can go to the counter with their tickets to receive a Halloween-themed limited edition card. Don't worry even if you don't win. As long as you buy a Halloween egg, you will have a chance to get a limited edition card. Also, there will be a limited edition Halloween-themed duel disc. A celebrity player's exclusive voice, a unique theme venue. If you buy it, you earn it. If you buy it, you earn it. 57 of 139. I'm so sleepy. My mind is blank. I've been lying there for hours. It's another huge chapter. I'm begging for more monthly votes. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.